Oh, well. Right? Oh, is that Calvin?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, is he cute?
Well, it's that's a city ordinance.
Right out of that. Houston, that's Cissy and Rosie.
Yeah, we got to
Yeah. Oh, it's a huge deal. Oh, it's really big. As a matter of fact, I mean, we got cancer here just right in our he's like, so it's a really big deal. He's got a few metros strength. These are my custodians, and of course, you know, they're in the same year. They talk. And it's very hard.
No, it doesn't matter.
You know what? I'm diverse. We have a son.
Oh man, I wonder if somehow like
Magnolia and Orem. So our son lives up there.
Oh, you know what? I'll try it.
Okay.
Okay, go back. So you're good.
Yes, well, I've been out there 4 times. Heading again for some stuff to go after Christmas. You're coming here and.
No, they had it like the Cinderella team this year. St. Peter's is what they're called, like major type of. And the coach, they said, so somebody asked the coach, hey, are your players worried or scared to kind of go in deeper they don't?
Yeah.
All my players grew up in New York and New Jersey. They're not afraid.
Yeah. Great restaurant.
Yeah, it was just like really like, it was great.
So I watched Montana State. This was in the women's tournament. Watched Montana State play Stanford. It was so painful.
Was it?
By the end of the first quarter, it was 23-0.
Perfect.
So I spent a couple of weeks. It was so sad. I mean, Montana State, 16. My God, yeah, they're 16.
Okay.
Yeah, so they were 16 against Stanford, who's number 1, but it was still just like.
Like you think they just one shot.
No, I'm telling you, they just kept throwing it down. Just good defense.
Did you get Montana State?
Matter of fact, we did
Johnston
January
as an
before
assistant
COVID.
coach.
No way, are you
Yeah.
serious?
Yeah.
Well, they did not play well.
Yeah, no assisting. No, even
They did not play well. Thank you, Tim, but we already discovered.
I just was reading why.
It is expensive, yeah.
I could see like this.
Let's go ahead and start.
Oh, yeah, get this one.
We can go ahead and start. And we'll start with Brandon. Brandon, it's quite a while.
He's not. Oh, he's not. A couple years ago.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Mayor and City Council. So tonight, our next work session meeting regarding our upcoming fiscal 23 budget and the discussions around that. And tonight we'll be focusing on primarily the expenditure, our operations of the general fund, as well as fleet overall for all funds, and our informational technology, our IT area, and the items that are part of our budget in relation to what things they have planned. So to start with, just as a kind of a somewhat of as a reminder, we're going to touch here on the revenue piece. These are the revenue changes. So these are the change that is occurring between last year, our current fiscal 22 budget, comparatively to what we anticipate putting in our fiscal 23 budget. We touched on our sales tax revenue increase here. I mentioned to you last time that that's based on a 5% increase for this current year over fiscal 21. with then a 5% increase for fiscal '23. Currently, we just got our sales tax numbers for March, and they went up some more as far as the percentage year to date. So that 5% is really, really conservative. With 5 months to go in the year, because the March one today was for January. So with 5 months still left to go, pretty confident that we're going to maintain that higher percentage year to, for the year increase this year versus fiscal '21, which then makes, of course, our 5% expected increase for fiscal '23 all that much more conservative, if you will, because it leaves us some leeway, some room to work with in that regard.
Brandon, on sales tax, how much do you think of that as inflation?
Probably quite a bit, but not certainly. So we're up 15.9% year to date.
And our inflation's about 7?
Well, the inflation the last few months has been 7, but for the year it's only been 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So a fair bit of that's spending power.
Yeah, and so you have several things. You have obviously a lot of the money that came in from the economic stimulus at the beginning of fiscal '21 would have flowed over. You had the advanced child tax credit payments that occurred from July through December. That would have had potentially had an impact as well. And the other reason I think that I don't think initially here it's going to see some of it, obviously, is inflation here, as Tom mentioned lately, but you're also going to have a huge amount of tax refunds that are going to be coming here in February, March, April. Those are probably going to also go into the economy. Now, they may be sucked up entirely by gas prices, but needless to say that there's going to still be some money out there. COPS grant, we got a second COPS grant. This is the increase related to that particular grant over and above what we already are receiving for the first COPS grant that we received. Obviously, the Justice Court across the way is continuing to ramp up their operations as they come out of COVID and a lot of the restrictions that they've faced in relation to whether it be trials, in-person trials, hearings, and things of that nature. While they still are doing a lot of stuff over online, over Zoom, etc., that's been hard for them to keep the pace with the number of cases that they need to get through. That has been gradually ramping up as they've been released from a lot of those restrictions that they've had. We talked about cemetery and the cemetery fees that we talked about last week, changes there. Just so you're aware, I did have a discussion with Dan Barrett, the cemetery sexton, regarding resident, non-resident, and he indicated, well, let's see about that one. So, we wondered what was the ratio. So, resident for lot purchases had about 599 sold. Out of those, 524 were resident, 75 were non-resident. Burials were 386, with resident being 273 and non-resident being 113.
Do we charge a different fee for non-residents for uncovering and covering the grave for the digging?
Yes.
Okay. I knew we did for the sale of the plot. I didn't know if we.
Yeah, that's the burials part. Yeah, so what Dan kind of mentioned is, what happens a lot is you may have, they may be a resident when they buy the lot, for instance, right? And maybe they move to St. George for a number of years or whatever it may be, or elsewhere. But then if they come back, they haven't moved back, but
they move back eventually.
Yeah, if they move back, it's not a problem, because now they're no more resident. But yes, I see what you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying.
But then the interment fee, they would pay the non-resident fee to then bury them, even though they paid a resident fee when they bought the lot, however that time period in between might be. The Utopia item is in relation, as you're well aware, our Utopia payment increases each year, but Utopia is now giving us, if you will, a rebate to cover that change in how much our payment is, so that our payment is staying steady. So this just reflects what that increase for the year would be. Nominal increase in property taxes and our ambulance services. Some decreases over here. We have the planning fees have been in a decline for the current year. We don't necessarily anticipate, that would be great if they do return around and head back the other direction, but for the time being, we're setting on a, similar to what we do with building permits, we kind of set a minimum, and if we exceed it, then great, which historically has been the case. Planning fees, we do somewhat similar to that, where we try to set a minimum amount, and if we exceed that, then fantastic. Any questions with those revenue changes? So you can see basically approximately a net increase in revenues of just over $6 million.
So the property tax is just new growth?
Primarily, yes, nothing to do with us increasing taxes. That's purely in relation to new growth, yes. So then we're going to touch on the expenditure side of the elements within the general fund, whether it be increases in expenses will be positive numbers. It's counterintuitive, right? And you'll see on the next page, you'll see some decreases in some expenditures, and those will be negatives, shown as negatives. Personnel increases for the year, approximately to be 1.8 million, almost 1.9 million.
That's based on how much total salary today?
Gosh, 26 million, 5 million.
So that's a fairly substantial
So
percentage.
this is represents a 6%
Then we can
increase.
divide backwards and figure it out, I think.
That's broken out from police, that's separate, that's just the city employees versus police?
Yes. Yes, so police, so you can see, so this is not part of this. Police personnel increases, the ones we just did here recently. This is the impact of what those are going into next year. So as far as progressing. Personnel step increases, which include all public safety, not only police, but fire, as well as some of our public works staff who are on step programs. Those are also not part of that number. You can see the associated automatic relate, for them just automatically stepping to the next position. And then the other one down here, I just wanted to point out this career ladder. We instituted a career ladder in public safety as well as several other, or in public works, I believe also has a career ladder option. Now that's obviously fully burdened, right? That's the expectation that anybody who could.
So again, that's conservative.
Yes.
We don't expect it to be that high.
Yes.
So Brandon, 2 weeks ago, you said you didn't know what percentage of increase you were gonna do for personnel. So does this mean you've determined 6%?
No, that's simply a placeholder, and we don't anticipate that personnel adjustments would be across the board on an even basis for necessarily all employees. That is more contingent on recommendations from human resources based on current market conditions for specific.
So this could go up, or you think this is a pretty good?
No, I think the 3% is representative of the merit, which is the traditional bump we've given employees on a year-over-year basis. But the additional 3% is a set aside for specific market adjustments. So frankly, it could come in a little lower than that. But we wanted to be relatively secure in providing a number that we could work with, because we do anticipate that this year is, from a compensation perspective, going to be more demanding than in years past.
But there's no COLA, it's just market and merit?
Correct.
That personnel increase, is that just within the existing employees, or does that include hiring new employees?
No,
that
that is
too?
existing employees.
That's just existing employees.
Yep. And so another note, we talked about career ladder and that being kind of the conservative, the max. That's what all of these represent a fully staffed city at all times. Obviously, that's not going to happen, right? You're going to have turnover. But we budget it that way to be ultra conservative, to make sure that we've covered all bases, that everybody who is we have a position for, that position is fully covered.
So even open recs?
Open positions, that's correct. They're budgeted in there.
So typically, just speaking to that, if I may, if, for example, we have vacancies in positions, we essentially use those dollars prospectively in the future for one-time needs. So we will, for example, have a position that may sit vacant for 4 or 5 months. The departments, per policy, the departments do not have discretion to use that personnel money. They have discretion to use other line items. For example, let's say, Chief Adams is here, and let's say he has an overage in his ammunition budget that he needs to fill. He can draw from another equipment line item to supplement that. But we don't allow that to happen as related to personnel costs. At the end of the fiscal year, those personnel costs then essentially will drop into our fund balance and can be reappropriated in future years.
There may be on occasion, we have someone maybe has to have overtime who's not an exempt employee.
Yes.
And if they have to have overtime to help cover that vacant position, then we would authorize them to use those dollars to cover that overtime.
Or out of class
You
pay.
don't put them in and then take them out or something.
And similar to the police increases that just occurred, we hired 6 new firefighters here recently. This just moves them, their pay that they're going to be getting now, pushes that into next year as well. So again, that's not part of the personnel increases mentioned above. And the last item related to all of that personnel stuff would be the increases for URS for pension related to all of those increases in pay, as well as any increases that have been currently happening in the current year. There are the URS rates themselves are flat and or potentially even slightly declined. So this is almost all related to just personal increases and not rate related increases with URS. Vehicle replacements, obviously from a prior year, we're now heading into a kind of the time frame when, from the recession, if you will, we didn't buy a lot of vehicles, if any, in a few of those years. So those vehicles are now starting to come to the need to be replaced. And so we're going to start seeing some bigger increases in relation. It's a pretty healthy number to begin with, but you're going to start seeing as we need to replace some of those vehicles that got pushed out because of the recession. We're going to start seeing those increases in relation to those vehicles. Not to mention just higher costs as we currently see them. That has having an impact as well in relation to how much it costs to get those vehicles.
Brandon, on your last slide, forgive me for not asking that, has insurance been quoted yet, or you're just estimating that?
So that is an estimate based on market trend as well as how our plan is running. We're independently rated, so our experience specifically defines what our premiums will be in the future.
And are we January to January?
We are January.
Okay, so that's why it's impossible to know in March. Got it, thank you.
As you may or may not be aware, we had a settlement in our Northgate property, and there's going to be an additional allocation to cover the costs of that property. And so this is the allocation that in the current year to be able to cover that settlement arrangement with
Irma.
How many years is that?
5 years.
Five.
To recall our relationship, we're self-insured with the agency, and they essentially will front load and pay that claim, and then we have an obligation to reimburse over a 5-year period. So this represents year 1 of a 5-year payment.
And is it that 210 every year?
Yes, we settled for $1,050,000.
So then some of the good items, if you will, as far as some things that we can look at, we're looking at that are reductions in relation to expenditures. So our recreation fund, we used to have the need to subsidize the recreation center. Obviously it's doing very well, and that subsidy is no longer required. So we have some availability of those dollars that used to go to subsidize are now available. You'll recall we did a study just a year and a half ago regarding pay for various positions, all the positions in the city. And we set aside dollars, not knowing exactly how much or who those increases would need to go to. that study has been completed, those changes have all been made, and obviously the money that was set aside in the current year to take care of that is already, it's not needed for fiscal '23. So again, those dollars now fall back in to be available for use. The election costs, not only last year, but there's obviously not an election in the given year, so those have been reduced down to where we think they need to be, which I think is.
So if in the event you as a council were to choose to put a question on the ballot in November, we actually have reached out to the county clerk and they have provided us with what they estimate it would cost to put a question on the ballot. And so we actually deducted that from the election costs that we spent last year. So what you see is the difference between what we anticipate a question will be on the ballot and what we budgeted last year for general election and municipal election costs.
So I'm not clear on that. So it's $185,000.
It would have been bigger. It would have been 195.
It'd been 235,000.
And the county quoted us $15,000 to put a question on the ballot, so we have that set aside if there were a need to do that.
Okay.
And if it doesn't get spent, it doesn't get
Yep.
spent. If it does, then the money's appropriated, or the money would be.
So, but this shows the savings right now, right?
Yes, because last year our budget, every second year, we have about 200,000
For
plus
city
dollars in
election.
costs for municipal elections.
You'll see this later in the expansions, but our Justice Court bailiffs, again, talking about the court doing much of their stuff online, haven't had the need for in-court requirements, therefore a bailiff has not been needed as nearly as often as in the past. So those costs, we're reducing those costs because we anticipate while the number is going to increase, it's still not going to meet the number that has been being budgeted for that. So we're decreasing that. And then you'll also see later on in our operational expansions, that other line, conversion of two employees who are currently variable hour / part-time, and they'll be converted to one position as a full-time position. So we'll be talking about that as well. Any general questions about those summaries? We'll talk here about those operational expansions in just a minute.
Is that total, that's pulling forward from
Yeah.
somewhere else?
It's
That total at the bottom doesn't add up to that page?
right, it's both pages combined. Yeah. So you'll notice 5.6 million, we mentioned the net number for revenue growth was approximately a little over 6 million. And so you have approximately a $325,000 net increase available, and which normally what would normally happen here is that 325 would be placed in a contingency account in case of need that might arise during the year where we need to move some money to cover whatever it might be.
And so the net of everything we looked at comes down to this 5.6 million?
Correct. Okay. So then, as I mentioned, we'll discuss those operational expansions that are specific to fiscal year 23 budget. So just so you're kind of aware of the process, we sent out a request for our departments to submit what are called operational expansions, which are increases to what they regularly or already do. As those are been submitted, a budget subcommittee and with department directors, we and the finance staff, we get with them and have a meeting to go over their requests and try to determine, okay, what kinds of questions, what kind of things do we need to tie in on, and this, have you thought about this, have you got multiple quotes from different vendors, have you got in essence, your bases covered in relation to those? Are there ways that we could potentially cover those expansions right now, rather than having it be part of our fiscal 23 budget? Do you have funds available? And we kind of do some research as far as existing funds that we think might be available. And then after having those meetings, then we go forward with our full budget committee and review all of those expansions, determining which ones we feel like should come forth to you here in this meeting, and which ones we think, oh yeah, we've either found a way to cover those or in the existing year, or yes, we're not going to be doing that for whatever the reason may be. And then those that would, as we approve those, they would then show up in our tentative budget as part of our budget. Any questions about kind of that process?
What month is this occurring?
So just
January.
January?
Yes, starts in January. The meetings, we just wrapped up kind of here at the first middle of March. And that's because there's those two sets of meetings. And then we get what we get today. About what the results
If I may, David, we meet obviously to talk about, this is a conversation about general fund expenditures. We have similar conversations about our enterprise funds. We have specific conversations about fleet, which Thane will obviously share some of those fleet discussions today, because fleet is a big ticket item. We have information technology discussions because IT is also a big expenditure fund, as well as our capital projects, which we have yet to share with you, but will be the subject and topic of our next budget meeting, where we'll review planned one-time capital improvements that we are looking to spend or budget for in the next fiscal year.
And obviously outside of fleet and IT, those capital items are primarily the big things are enterprise funds, right? So in our general fund, the expansions that we have for under fire, we have planned for 3 new firefighter positions. That's over and above the 6 that we just did, 3 more in relation to getting some, if I remember correctly, some staff, be able to better staff our current fire stations and their abilities for taking vacation time and not having to have overtime coverage for those, as well as obviously somewhat preparing for the Vineyard Station down the road.
So if I may, this request was brought forward by Chief Sanderson. This last fiscal year, we budgeted for 6 new additional firefighters to address the increasing service needs for the city of Vineyard. And so we now have staff that are essentially on hand in Station 3 to specifically respond to issues and incidents in Vineyard. And it is essentially a intermediate step between servicing the needs of Vineyard with Orem firefighters to essentially building a new station in Vineyard, as we have agreed to do per contract into the future. So that is in place. But what Chief Sanderson has been talking with us about is we typically staff 24/7, 5 firefighters at each of our fire stations. But when we have an employee who is sick, or we have an employee who's on vacation, then those staffing levels drop to 4. Or in some cases, if we have a vacation and a sickness in one station, it will drop to 3. So, and then we have historically backfilled those essentially temporary vacancies with overtime and firefighters who are on our existing payroll, but then we would compensate them in time and a half. As we got looking at where we are spending our personnel monies, it was more, I guess you could say, efficient for us to actually budget for 3 additional firefighters to serve as floaters, to work through and to work in different stations to accommodate for vacation or sick time and allow them to kind of work into the schedule. We actually had a conversation about funding 6 of them, but the discussion ended with let's fund 3, let's see how our overtime trends this next fiscal year and see if it continues to make sense to do some of this and add some additional positions with the fire service next year. The interesting thing, of course, about the fire service is because of that 24/7 coverage and because we operate 3 shifts 24/7, we can't just add 1 person. If we're going to add 1 person, we've actually got to add 3 people to service each respective shift. So that is why we have 3 positions that are recommended. each floater representing one additional body per shift.
Thank you, Jacob. And then equipment, obviously associated, firefighters have some equipment that they need to use, of course. They also have asked for some extrication tools. This is, if I remember correctly, this is a sinking fund, beginning of a sinking fund to save up to be able to purchase all of those extrication tools
So,
at a certain point.
sorry, Brandon. This $15,000, on occasion, you'll have an opportunity to visit with the fire department, and one of the comments they sometimes will make is, we could really use a new Jaws of life. I was gonna say Jaws for life, not Jaws of life, but Jaws of life. And this gives us an opportunity on an annual basis to essentially provide $15,000 of equipment. And so at the chief's discretion, based on needs throughout the entire department, he has that money available to purchase equipment on an annual basis. One year it may be new Jaws of life, the next year it may be equipment for swift water rescue, the following year it may be some sort of aerial equipment that they need. So it's not designated for one specific purpose, but it's designated as a repeating operating allowance, allowing them to essentially swap out their tools.
And this year it's extrication.
And this year it's the Jaws of life.
Is what they're expecting. At least that's what they're anticipating.
Yeah.
Development services, obviously Lane Gray, you've all met Lane Gray, our capital project manager. Because of that new position, that vehicle he did have needs to stay with Public Works, and he needs a vehicle, obviously, to be able to go around and do what he needs to do in relation to his county projects. Public Works, you heard before about how busy our cemetery is. They are requesting a new Public Works technician to be able to work there, to be able to help with alleviate some of that workload, and maybe not to totally burn out all of our cemetery people so that they don't end up in the same place as they're working. That's as good as you get from an accountant, come on.
I think the other thing with cemetery too is there's a couple retirements that are on the horizon. And so this gives an opportunity while we're busy to kind of start to some succession planning up there as well.
Yes. Over on our police, so over the years, they have lots of software. You'd be surprised, they have lots of software. Police use software, it's amazing to me. Well, a lot of those things, you add a few here and you add a little there. They've just been trying to cover that with various funds, as kind of Jamie alluded to. Oh, we pulled some money from this account and pulled some money from that account to be able to cover it for this year. It's kind of finally come to the point where we need to actually budget for it, plan. We're using it. We just need to have it, because that means there are other areas that they could have used the money for wherever it is they took it, that they weren't able to get because they needed to cover their software costs. That's that item.
Do you expect that to be an ongoing, like an annual?
Yes,
amount?
yes. So that one would be an ongoing from this point forward, yes.
Is that charge against our IT department, or is that outright purchases of software?
Obviously, our IT department helps them with that, but for the most part, it's their things that they're using within their department that are specific to police.
They buy it from outside?
Yes.
It used to be we would buy the software and then we pay an ongoing maintenance charge. But now the industry seems to be transitioning more to they lease us the product and they license it to us. And we have to pay year over year over year.
We buy a username and password essentially.
Exactly.
Welcome to the cloud.
Yeah.
The SWAT budget, so the SWAT budget in the past has been $5,000. Josh, I mean, can you just give a brief description of what you found that really is behind this request?
On average, we're spending about $20,000 a year on equipment and training and all of those types of things. And again, it's been kind of that rob Peter to pay Paul from somewhere else type thing versus having it a managed line item budget. One of the things that we found a huge deficiency in is a lot of their protective equipment, PPE, has been expiring. Then we're trying to catch up to the fact that they're wearing expired armor and things like that, which certainly increases our, not only just the safety thing, but liabilities and so forth. So,
and even some of the officers have actually gone out and used their own monies to purchase some of this equipment, and Chief Adams and I just felt like, you know, if they're going to use equipment, it's going to be Orem equipment. We're going to make sure they're appropriately suited for the job.
Similar to then the handgun, and similar to many of our other things, you get to the point where these handguns need to be replaced, and all of a sudden you've got to come up with a big amount of money to make that replacement happen. So we're want to insert here it'll be an annual, again, it'll be an annual item. It's a sinking fund towards whenever that point is that those handguns need to be replaced. We have the funds already available to be able to do that.
Is there a schedule for that, or do you just kind of do them when they?
good question. So there's kind of a best practices type of a thing. But what we found in the past year, we've had 7 different ones that came in for inspection that failed. It would have been, it would have been a catastrophic failure if they would actually do it. So, and they are 7 years old right now, kind of the standard. Best practice, they talk 5 years. So we're 2 years past that now.
So you might have handguns, you just can't buy both. Well, we buy them now, but you might have better sources than the public.
We are using our budget allocation from 2 years ago because they're over a year behind delivering what we've tried to purchase. Yeah, kids can. Don't tell anybody though.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Is that,
No bullets.
I'm just curious, but on those handguns expiring, is that with a certain level of usage? Like,
Yeah, so we do firearms training 4 times a year, so they're continually being used with training and so forth, and then exposure to elements. So it's kind of
I'm just curious as far as like regular handgun and then a person's safe. Don't you use that often? They last forever, but you're using yours all the time. And
they're out every day.
So they have so many hours they practice at the range, or is that?
Yes, yeah. So we have about 40 hours a year of mandatory training.
How many rounds go through in a year, do you think, in your practice?
That's a good question. Well, with my personal practice, or what?
I'm just
I was gonna say I'm the worst. I'm the worst. No, I think qualifications and the training and stuff, somewhere around 600 rounds a year.
What does your typical handgun cost?
They are, for the state contract we can replace them for, I believe, the number we have right now is 425, something like that, 425 per, and that's just for the handgun itself, not any of the other.
Put sights on them or anything?
That's part of moving to a transition to a different weapon sight system and everything like that. So, yeah, we're using what I'm fine with, because I'm old school. We're using 20-year-old technology, and it's kind of, again, with best practice and stuff, to move to a different sight system and stuff that increases accuracy and so forth. So, yeah.
So that, again, they can just shoot you in the leg instead of,
You're right.
Preferably not at all.
Yeah,
That's
preferably
only
not.
all, right?
That's a better answer. That's a better answer.
But we do, for example, things like obviously SWAT equipment, handguns, the vests that our police officers wear, all of them have expiration dates. So we need to be mindful of those expiration dates. And Josh and his team in the last year have done a good job of inventorying all of our equipment and identifying where we have deficiencies. So this is an effort on our part to make sure that we don't have deficiencies into the future.
And then the final item there for police is our evidence custodian. Currently, we have one, and she does everything, all the time. As you can imagine, That's a lot of pressure, that's a lot of stress, and you're on call all the time. So this cost here is to convert, in essence, one of a part-time position, variable hour position, and have another full-time evidence technician. So that we can help in the case, when the need arises, that we're not relying on one person all the time to be able to do everything. Finance, favorite department, I'm sure. We touched briefly on our justice court. They currently have 2 variable hour individuals. One of them is going to be going to law school. So we felt like this was a good time, as talking with Jody, the court administrator. She really feels like it would be best at that point. It would be a good time to, in essence, bring that 2 part-time positions into 1 full-time position for better consistency. And it takes quite a while to be able to learn the court system. So, when you keep bringing in part-time people, right when you've got them trained, most of them are younger and they don't stay for a terribly long time. And so now all of a sudden, boom, you're back to square one as far as having to teach them about how the court operates and the things they need to do. And then in my department, we currently don't have a method to really be able to do capital budgeting. It's all through Excel spreadsheets. So prepares their spreadsheet. So-and-so prepares their spreadsheet. So-and-so prepares their spreadsheet. We try to bring them all together and read the different ways that they put their stuff together. We've even tried, as we started a process of creating kind of a standard spreadsheet to try to do it, and that comes with mixed results. So we looked out at the marketplace, and there are some great capital budgeting tools where it's a specific program from these companies where we can plug all of that information into. And not only is it plugged in for the current year, it rolls forward, it stays there permanently, and it's unlimited access for whoever we need to be in there, and then allows us to monitor, whether we want to go 5 years, whether we want to go out 10 years. So those master plans that we have, all that information can be plugged in there, and it's not, in essence, kind of re-entered all the time. And on top of that, the other advantage of this software that we've been looking at gives us the ability to then take that information and create a web page so that anybody can go and see, well, gosh, I wonder what capital projects we have planned, not only now, but potentially into the future. And so this software allows us the capability of being able to do those kind of things.
Would that just be, so data going forward, would you be able to backload information, data from years past?
We can,
tracking purposes?
yeah, we're going to try to figure out, we had just a conversation yesterday with the particular vendor that we're looking at, and we can. Obviously, that becomes a little more difficult when we go backward, but for those projects that are perhaps still ongoing, we would load that information. For projects that maybe have already completed, we'll have to try to debate whether we want to load that information or not. Yeah.
Software.
Yeah. So that's what that one is. So those are general fund. So these are related to non-general fund funds. In our recreation fund, we are proposing to start a club swim team. I saw Bryce walk in at a perfect time to be able to kind of address that for you guys. So Bryce, if you want to kind of just touch on what the thoughts are in relation to that particular item.
Yes.
Thank you.
As many of y'all know, the OTAC co-sponsored swim team decided to disband in August of 2021. And since then, we have been renting our pool water at the fitness center to a Provo-based club swim team, the UV Rays. And it's been a great relationship, but that has resulted typically in Orem families being required to go to one of several pools in the county, depending on the age group and the speed of their child, to participate in the swim team. And so by proposing here a USA Swimming Club swim team, we would be able to better ensure that Orem families are able to swim in Orem at our pool and go from go from there. So obviously there is a budget expansion, but associated with those costs that are reflected here, there would also be significant revenue. So this would be a revenue neutral or revenue positive program. So this is the expense side that you're seeing here, in addition to the swim team and meet fees that would be collected with the program.
Was the revenue shown on the other page?
No, because that was just general fund only, so
Okay,
we didn't touch on.
so this is not, okay, so this will be a net neutral,
Yes,
or we hope.
we hope.
Including the sinking fund, or is that separate?
No,
No, not including, well, yes, I mean, we have other revenues obviously within the recreation fund that would be covering the sinking fund.
But as
It's
far
not
as-
specifically to that swim team
Yeah,
program.
the swim team would be the top two, right?
Correct.
So, I mean, I'm sorry, I came a little late, so is this, so you're Orem is running this swim team?
Sorry, one more time.
Orem is running this, they're,
This would be a Orem City program.
because I mean, OTEC, you used to have a lot of, like parents could volunteer to defray, volunteer at meets in order to defray offset some of their costs. Are you still gonna offer that kind of thing, or are you familiar with what they did with OTEC?
Yeah, and there's a lot that goes into something like that. I think one benefit of having it be a municipally run program is some of the administrative infrastructure we have would not require us to be as volunteer driven, especially on the admin side. Yes, day of, meet of, age group parent participation, there will be a number of volunteer opportunities, but as we prepared this budget, this would be something that would not be an increased cost, and we also think that would be kinder to families' schedules, so not as much of a requirement on time and all of that, but also not the expense of some other options.
Okay, and are we hiring people to cover what was previously volunteer parent positions, or you can cover that?
So what's represented here is on deck personnel. This is technical personnel, your coaches and everything like that. We have, like generally speaking, like the front desk, we have people that answer phone calls 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. So we're not going to have to hire additional. We'd be able to sort of assimilate it into the other functions that we do.
Okay, great.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, this is one full-time
One full-time
person
head
coach with a myriad of, what do you call them, deck,
Yeah, on
deck
personnel, yeah.
personnel.
So Bryce, I know you did your research for quite a while, to be able to come up with these numbers and make sure it was gonna pencil. So are we able to see those?
Yeah, I'd be glad to get the same spreadsheet that I shared with Brandon. We projected break even at 71% swim team capacity. And so we're not, we don't have to hit 100% on year one to be able to cover our
And the
costs.
Recreation Commission was in favor of moving forward.
But yeah, I'd be glad to get that spreadsheet so y'all can sort of see the representative numbers that we put together.
I didn't realize the money that you can make with swimming, right, compared to, say, baseball.
So you have like,
Let the record show that Dave acknowledges us for other things.
Baseball.
We're just gonna charge you Steve now $200 for each send it out.
You already did. They're going to stay with their club and their coach. They're not going to switch at 17 years old to a brand new club. So we will likely be a very large U12, U14, but we'll have the gold tier and what's represented here is to hire a very talented head coach and be able to compete with the high rate.
And the key is the coach. That's the key. Good day.
And then, as you pointed out, the 100,000 sinking fund is, in the past, we, in essence, never set aside any money to keep the facilities, the recreation facility, up to snuff. So the idea here would be obviously to set aside money from, gains made by the fitness center, so that as those things, those needs are come up, that we have funds available for them to be able to do those. Our fleet, within our fleet fund, with Thane, we have a need for, we keep having to, if you will, send a mechanic out to do something. So what we're wanting to get here is an assistant who, in essence, becomes a runner, or be able to go get things, or be able to go get that, so that our fleet, our talented fleet individuals can stay doing what they do best. And so this is a part-time, it's not a full-time position, it's a variable hour position. Within our water fund, we have a particular position that we want to upgrade from that position to a program manager position. Primarily because of what they do. We've been kind of carving things up and just kind of trying to get them done rather than having an individual entirely focused on this is their job, as we do several other program managers that focus on specific elements of our water system. And this is just for that reclassification. Within our IT fund, talking about one person, I don't know how many of you know Doug Fitt, but Doug Fitt is primarily our one IT network engineer. With all of the networking and all of the computer systems that we have nowadays, the time kind of has come where we need to hire a second network engineer to be able to work within that group and be able to help Stephen Cannon and Doug be able to accommodate all of the networking issues that we have. Obviously, the second item there, IT operational equipment. Not only do we have more and more need of IT equipment throughout the organization, but that equipment continues to cost more and more, especially in the current environment. So whether that amount will need to stay that over the long term, we don't know, but at the current time, we'd like to see that budget increase to be able to accommodate those additional needs. And then we're want to hire a cybersecurity firm to kind of analyze our security within our IT infrastructure and be able to give us some kind of analysis in relation to that. And if I remember, Ernesto, that's an ongoing element. Is that not correct?
Yes, that's a yearly fee that firm can charge.
So this is really an intermediary solution between what we have now, which is nothing, to what we anticipate long-term we'll need to hire in-house cybersecurity analysts to constantly monitor our cybersecurity issues. So this firm is going to do that for us as we ramp up and as we add systems to our IT fund. And then the facilities fund, we have obviously some high traffic carpet maintenance areas. You've seen some of those in the library, and we have other areas throughout the city. This is setting up a fund to be able to, again, one of these sinking funds where we're able to draw the money from that as those areas have the need to be able to have to be fixed or improved. And so we're setting aside those funds on an ongoing basis. Obviously, we have a huge amount of custodial needs, particularly as we brought the fitness center on board, but also within our other areas. And given the current work environment, the cost of those custodians is also increasing. So this kind of helps alleviate somewhat, not entirely, but somewhat both of those areas for the time being. And then we have some overhead doors that require some maintenance, and so we've added an element there to be able to help cover paying for those overhead doors and maintain them over time. So some other items that are not part of our fiscal 23 budget, but we wanted to bring to your attention, as I mentioned, we have those meetings where we identify some items that can we take care of those in our current fiscal year, that they originally were submitted as operational expansions, but we've gone ahead and said, oh, you know what, we have dollars here or there to take care of those. One of the big ones is in fire. So currently we've been saving money for cardiac monitors and stretchers. Those dollars will now stop, and we're being replaced by this subscription, this ALS subscription, whereby for a 10-year period, all of that equipment is covered and provided, and they replace it, I think, every the 5th year, and if I remember correctly. Yeah. And so ongoing now, we will have all the same equipment. It will be, as, if you will, its useful life period. We replaced at that time period, and it will be a $209,000 cost for over that time period. The current year, like I mentioned, is already covered. The first year payment is already covered with existing dollars within the fire department.
So there will not be a cost in the fiscal '23 budget related to that, but we wanted to bring to you that when fiscal '24 comes along, obviously that 209 will then flow into that as a regular line item.
So is that an annual cost or is that a?
It's an annual cost, yes.
That's annual?
So what we have traditionally been setting aside monies on an annual basis to purchase this type of equipment, stretchers, cardiac monitors, other durable equipment that we put in our, for example, in our ambulances. We actually got looking at it, we had an analyst in our office look at it, Jenica, and what we essentially concluded was if we actually have to maintain the equipment that we own, we're actually spending probably more money owning the equipment and maintaining it than if we are leasing it. And included in the lease is that maintenance agreement, because the useful life of this equipment is about the same on a lease arrangement versus an ownership arrangement. So we could actually potentially save money in a lease relationship versus owning the equipment. And we never have to worry about fluctuating maintenance costs because it's covered within this agreement. So for example, if we have an AED device, and I'm not talking about the ones that are, for example, on our wall here, but they have very expensive devices on a rig. They will go out and leave the scene and they will drop one of these, which unfortunately happens more than you think. And there's a $3,000 screen repair on that monitor. Historically, we've been paying $3,000 every time it's dropped. But under a maintenance agreement like this, it's covered by the maintenance. So this is AEDs. There are devices that will essentially perform chest compressions on patients rather than having, for example, a firefighter do CPR. They actually there are devices that do the compressions for you. There are traditional stretchers and then what we call bariatric stretchers, which are stretchers for larger individuals. We had an individual, for example, last month that we needed to transport. He was over 800 pounds. We don't have a stretcher to accommodate an 800-pound patient. So we actually had to reach out to an agency in Salt Lake, and they came down with an ambulance and serviced our needs because that wasn't part of our inventory of supplies or of equipment. And so within this arrangement, we actually now have a bariatric stretcher that will be included in addition to the standard stretchers that we provide or that we have in each of our rigs. So from our perspective, it was an enhancement in terms of equipment, but at the same time, from a cost perspective, it was actually cost neutral or could even potentially be beneficial provided that we maintain the same level of maintenance on these devices as we historically have done.
So is this really a expansion of that number, or is it just a break even after your workshop?
It's really a break even, and that's why we're noticing, some years and the number fluctuates a little bit based on the current age of our equipment and what needs to be replaced when. So we called it an expansion because one year it may be 209,000, the next year it's 239,000. The following year it could be 189,000.
But you think over time it's going to just be a break?
Yeah.
Public Works had a couple of blowers and a spreader that they were able to find some equipment money within their budget to be able to cover those items. And facilities, the tank out here behind public safety where we had all the issues. So as far as an enclosure around that tank, then again, we've identified some dollars to be able to take care of that as well. So that's the end of the operational section. I'm talking about those things related to general fund and some of our other funds. Want to turn the time over to Ernesto to be able to discuss information technology.
Can I ask you a question on the fleet? So do we look at other cities and compare how often we turn over, I'm not talking about police and fire, but the other trucks we see driving around the city. Do we turn ours over faster than like Provo? Do we know?
Thane?
No, we're actually a lot slower than most of the fleets I've talked to and analyzed on most of the equipment. A lot of lease equipment, like lease cars. I'll throw out a 5-year on a lease car, we're going 8 years.
I don't mean, I'm just thinking, when I go walking in the mornings, I walk to the park, it's like Provo. During the summer, I've noticed their trucks pull up, they're pretty rough looking trucks. And I see our stuff always looks really new, so I didn't know if that means we could get another year out of our,
It's great mechanics.
This are, but, so I'm just wondering, compared to other cities, like their vehicles for maintaining parks and all that kind of stuff. So
That's good.
throw that our turnover more or less.
Sorry, what was the last part?
So, don't listen to him. No, no, I'm just wondering, I'm not talking, I understand with fire and police, we want to have our most up-to-date equipment. I'm just wondering, on the other fleets that we have in the city, are we turning ours over faster than other cities?
Some of both. I sent out a little survey to some of the fleet managers I network with, and it almost seems like the smaller the city, the longer they keep their equipment and maybe financially, I don't know how to say it, not as much revenue. And then other cities were turning over a little quicker. It was funny, there's a municipal, how long do you keep your equipment? And there was 2 of them that said, until there's absolutely no life left.
But you answered Donna's question about Provo, that we keep ours a little longer than Provo. Isn't that what you said initially?
But you said that about fire and police, or did you say that about everything?
I'm saying about fire and police.
So I'm talking, forget fire and police, I'm talking about the rest of the team.
It's hit or miss. We're somewhere pretty average. When I went and looked at those different municipals I reached out to, this is probably about 8 or 10 months ago, we were, more than some and less than others. We're about average, I thought.
Well, and I've heard like truck prices are just through the roof right now. Are we still gonna replace, or are we thinking we wanna ride that out a little longer? Have you looked at that?
Yeah, we're looking at doing some leasing on a few things, and but prices are inconsistent. A lot of the pickups and cars have been pretty consistent, but there's still maybe, you never know, there may be a surprise coming next fiscal year. On a lot of the custom built vehicles, all kinds of increases.
We don't typically replace vehicles just based on age. We have a series of metrics that we look at, everything from age, mileage, running hours, the level of repairs that we have had on some of the vehicles, if vehicles have an accident history, if there are excessive recalls on the vehicle, all of those things are considered, and every year Thane will bring to us essentially a list of recommended replacement vehicles from the perspective of the fleet department, the fleet division, and then meetings will take place between the fleet division and each respective operating department, and there's discussion had individually about each of these vehicles, and today we'll show you each of these vehicles. So not, for example, every vehicle that we're replacing this year is let's say a 2015 model. We actually have models that date back to the 1990s. I think there's one vehicle in here, 1985. So there are some vehicles that we will hold on based on use and the life of the vehicle. We have another program that we are running where we actually take some of the vehicles from our enterprise funds, and we will actually sell those vehicles to the general fund. So a lot of the parks vehicles that you're seeing are actually 3 or 4 years old when our park staff actually takes ownership of those vehicles. Our water vehicles and our storm vehicles and our sewer vehicles actually may be a little newer because we're essentially allowing those purchases to take place in those enterprise funds, and then we are migrating those vehicles over time into the general fund. And then finally, this discussion we've been having about leasing and lease options. In fact, this year we're going to try, for example, entering into lease agreements for certain vehicles. You talk about the price of trucks, for example. If you go to a lot right now, the price of a truck is astronomically high. But we don't buy vehicles at lot prices, we buy them under state contract. So part of the essentially proposal we put together is we will purchase these vehicles, we will run them for several years, and then we will sell them. And we potentially and are anticipating that we're going to be able to sell these vehicles for close to what we paid for them. So we're not going to go all in on that effort immediately, but we're going to try it with, not with our patrol vehicles, but with our police and fire administrative vehicles, because we think obviously that makes sense. We don't have to put all the bells and whistles on them like we do a patrol vehicle, and we're going to see how that goes. So we treat our fleet and essentially the rotation of our fleet differently based on, the function of the fleet, where the fleet's home is, i.e. an enterprise fund versus a general fund. We're even looking at lease options prospectively, all in an effort to try and effectively do more with less.
And we'll touch on a lot of that when we hand this out.
Yeah, we'll hand this out and talk about that here.
Because I just had a question on police, the police cars. I drive by and the police officers seem like they're wedged in there. It's a small little car. And, with all the equipment, to me, I think it would be very uncomfortable, but maybe there's a little bigger car we can get for the police officers. Because to me, they're wedged in there and it's like driving a Mini.
It's probably the Taurus you're seeing.
Yeah, we've had.
Yeah, it's a Ford, and that's one of the problems, but.
So we've had conversations about that with Chief Adams and Ford, for example. They don't make a police car anymore. So all of our vehicles for the last couple of years have been Ford Explorer SUVs, because that's essentially the package that Ford Motor Company is selling and we're buying. And for some safety reasons, Dodge, for example, they do make a Dodge Charger that is a police vehicle, but we've had a lot of problems with them, and they have a couple of blind spots in the vehicle. And so we've made the conscious effort that we're going to replace all of our vehicles prospectively with Ford Explorers. Mm-hmm. So, any new vehicle, any new police vehicle we bought in the last 2+ years has been an SUV. And we anticipate that we're going to continue down that path with the SUVs. One, because of, obviously, they're all 4-wheel drive. Second, they're a little roomier than the sedans. And third, they're not cheap, but they're cheaper than some of the alternatives. And, we've even had conversations about transitioning more of our fleet to hybrid type options to deal with the fuel increases that we're having to pay for right now.
So, and if we can, so we'll touch some more on the future thing comes up, but if we'll have Vanessa go ahead and kind of touch on IT or to go through.
Well, thank you, Mayor and City Council, for giving me the opportunity to present to you today. I'm just going to touch on some highlights. Feel free to stop me if you have any further questions. I could have gone on and on with this, but I thought I had to read it down to not bore you to sleep. We have 3 different areas in IT. One is the systems engineering. One is the help desk, and then the third one is our software development team. So first we'll start with systems engineering. These are some of the highlights that we've accomplished this last year. This is by no means everything, but just some of the interesting things that we've done. We've implemented an endpoint management solution, which allows us to remotely be able to support our users anywhere that they may reside. This software has been very helpful in allowing us to, giving us better capabilities for setting up things, for example, printers that we'd have to go on site before. Now we can do it remotely. We've also received a third-party security audit from WebCheck. They did a comprehensive audit of our security to to our network from the outside, and then also did some limited testing on the inside. And we didn't have any critical vulnerabilities. They did suggest about a half dozen different things that we could do to improve our security there. And we're working on that. Water reclamation admin building network rebuild. This was done in anticipation for their SCADA installation, and we were able to get that done. Consolidation of police dispatch with the state. The state put in a new 911 system, and we helped them to be able to install that and get all the fiber where it needed to go for that project. And then also Timpanogos Park network expansion. In our help desk team, one of the things we did was we've implemented Apple Business Manager for all our Apple devices. They're a little bit different than everything that we do. Apple doesn't let any other third parties manage their devices, and so we had to implement their management system citywide in order to be able to manage those devices. We migrated to a new ticketing system. It gives us a little bit better documentation on items that come in for request to IT. And then number of tickets completed last or up to this year through March was about 1,080. Also, number of direct calls to the help desk, 3,036. Our software development team has been really busy as well. All our applications are now developed for multi-platform devices. We do mobile and desktop at the same time, which we had to upgrade to different technologies in order to do that. And so most of our programmers are trained on that now, and they've been developing those applications. One of them is the search clerk for the recorder's office, the HR portal mobile application for human resources. We finished phase 1 on that. A job application mobile app for citizens to be able to apply for our jobs. Boards of Commission portal, waste management interface mobile app, passport and fingerprint scheduling portal, and then we've started the HR portal phase 2, which includes a lot of our time card workflow in that. And for fiscal year 2022, 2023, these are some of the items that we want to concentrate on or that we're planning to work on. We're going to replace 94 desktop computers as part of our rotation program.
So it's a 3-year or 4-year plan you have?
It's a 4-year plan. Okay. We're also going to replace 16 police. They have, I think, a total of about 65 devices. So one of the things that we've been having a lot of challenge with is replacement of those devices because they keep going up in price. We've seen some considerable price increases on that equipment. And that's kind of what Brandon addressed earlier. We're also working on the water AMI automated meter reading project. That is in kind of a version 2 that we still have to integrate with our utility billing system and some other systems as well. And we're also going to have an enterprise-wide focus on cybersecurity. This is becoming a bigger and bigger deal as we move forward. There's a lot of state sponsors of cyber crimes. Russia's one of them, China's another, North Korea. And they're really all out. There's an all-out attack on municipalities, state government, federal government. And so we always have to be on our toes, and that's one of the things that we're really going to concentrate, and we've been concentrating on. The HRIS system software development phase 3 will also start next fiscal year. We also plan on a new library ILS system that will be integrated with all our other applications. And then our graphical information system reorganization, which is the GIS. And that is, we're trying to create a more centralized resource for GIS so that we can eliminate redundancy and improve efficiency with the sharing and collaboration of that system. So that's kind of where we're at. I did go through it pretty quick, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Did you develop the software for the rec center or is that?
Yes.
That's,
yeah. Yeah, we've developed most of our core applications. There's some that we do contract out, but we also integrate those into our core applications that we have in-house.
and what is your staff made up of?
We have, we have 4 programmers. One of them we just refilled his position, and then we have a programmer lead, a programming and software development lead. He kind of coordinates all the projects. But that's our software development staff. And then we have 4 help desk individuals. One is the help desk supervisor. And then we have just Doug as the network engineer. And then me and Steve Cannon is the assistant manager. But we've like I said, Doug is the only network administrator right now, and we're seeing a lot more and more demand for systems architecture and system design. And he's just doing everything he can to keep up. We're currently about 30 projects behind that we have in the hopper that we haven't even been able to get to, that are more than about 80 hours a piece. And so we really are looking for some help there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, we'll turn the time over to Thane, but I want to hand these out. Hopefully you can read them. Okay. She's there. I'll give one. Thank you.
Thanks.
There's 2. Who's your supposed to be in there?
Well,
Let me turn this on.
okay. Steve Downs pulling up the presentation. Thanks, Brandon, for handing this out. Just a little bit, actually just an introduction. I'm Thane Carter, I'm the fleet manager. I enjoy working for Orem City, been here 17 years, it's a great place to work. Probably retire from here. Anyway, we have a spreadsheet here that talks just a little bit of how this works. We got the department section. We're going to have general fund, and then general fund leasing, and then we'll go into the enterprise funds as we go down. You'll see those towards the bottom. So back up top to the general fund, you'll see the section or the subsection, the vehicle description, and then we have the miles or hours, and then we have 8 different parameters that we look at. Jamie talked about this earlier for a minute. Total miles, age of parts, replacement, repairs. The WRS total is kind of how all those rank together. You'll see that the ambulance is at 53 here, pretty high. New vehicle description. Most of the vehicles are pretty similar, but there are a couple changes, like a couple hybrids in patrol. We'll be talking about those. And then in the final columns there, you get the running totals of each section and subsection. So anyway, we'll start into the presentation here. Fleet replacement FY 2023. There we go, thank you. So we're proposing that we replace just over $1 million in general fund. Enterprise fund is about 1.2 million with a total of around 2.2 million.
But is that basically every vehicle on here you're proposing replacement, is that correct?
Yes,
Thank you.
all of those are on the spreadsheet.
Thank you.
Here's how we've kind of compared over the last few years, if you want to compare. This is the general fund. I wasn't planning on spending a lot of time on these two slides, but if you have questions, go ahead. This next slide is the enterprise funds and how we compare. With that, we'll start right into the fire department.
You know, one of these as a police administration vehicle, which is a 2019, that just seemed early to replace it. Was there a reason?
That's the leasing program.
Yeah, okay, so that one is a leased one.
Yeah, and we'll get to that.
Okay,
Some of that's a new thing that we're working on.
I just teed you up. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So to start with, we have the fire department here for an ambulance replacement. It's one of the vehicles that's gone up a lot, $240,000 compared to $185,000 what we paid for the last one. Just incredible. And then we have a leased vehicle, Ford Explorer, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. They kind of have those grouped together. I think it'll be easier to talk about those at that point.
Sorry if I may. Does the ambulance pay for itself with charges?
That's a question I don't know.
No,
Not even close?
not even close. You know, the cost of fire apparatus is like Thane said, it's getting incredibly expensive. We have 4 frontline ambulances, and then we have 3 backups. So just in ambulances alone, we have almost, $1.6 million worth of equipment.
And the charges we get back is pretty minimal.
We depending on who we transport. So for example, if we transport a privately insured individual, we can bill at a private insurance rate.
Medicare,
Medicaid, they have a flat $200 and something amount. And, we'll run on a call, we'll run that vehicle plus 4 to 5 firefighter paramedics and service a call for $200.
And do private ambulances service our area?
For,
on
limited occasions for interfacility transport. So,
but if I call 911, I'm getting an Orem City.
You were getting an Orem City.
So if I want to save $200, I call Uber
What's
instead.
a typical transfer? 4,500?
Well, and then, yeah, and we don't bill if we don't transport either, so a lot of times we get called out, we go.
Oh, yeah, you come,
unless
the
we're
paramedic
taking-
sees me and you're okay.
And it's happened, admittedly, it's happened to us where, you probably ought to go, like, well, we're pretty close to the hospital, we'll just drive over there, thanks for checking us out, So we go to a lot of assisted living
And there's no
facilities.
fee for that? For a paramedic?
We can't charge unless we
I'm going
transport.
to my doctor, it's going to this.
Well,
That
frankly,
happens.
but that's part of the challenge that we face is for those that are on Medicare, Medicaid, for example, it's cheaper for them to call us and to get, for example, diagnosed on site and then transported to a facility because the costs are limited.
Wow.
Yeah, you joke about this idea of Ubers.
Oh, I know they're doing it in cities.
But there are organizations and EMS services that are essentially contracting with Ubers. The other thing I want to just point out is one of the things we have and will be implementing here in the next few months is what we call a paramedic rescue, which is we're going to move away potentially from the ambulance fire truck model, and we are actually going to be putting paramedics into a Ford Explorer Suburban type vehicle where they can respond because the cost of service and unless there's a transport there.
And then you'll call if there's a transport needed. So we wouldn't have as many ambulances, we would supplement with vehicles, basically. Yes.
Potentially, yeah. We're looking at trying to change the model of how we respond to EMS paramedic incidents because the costs associated with each essential response is incredibly high. And this doesn't include any of our fire apparatus, which, for example, will take delivery on a tiller truck that was what, thinking $1.3 million?
Yeah, roughly.
And we are in the process of ordering another pumper, that's about $850,000.
Yes.
So we used to be able to buy pumpers for $450,000, now we're up to $850,000.
In what period of time then?
Oh, probably 5 or 6 years.
5 or 6 years.
Yeah, and this is the kind of equipment Brandon talks about where when we get a fire vehicle built is effectively from the ground up. I mean, they have a chassis, but then it's built to our specification, and they literally bend the diamond plate, they'll create the cab, they'll do it all to our specification, so it's custom made for me.
Will the $200 cover the cost of the paramedic going out? Will that be closer?
How much do you get for private insurance?
We're billed, the state EMS, Bureau of EMS tells us the maximum that we can bill, and we bill that maximum.
You know what it is, right?
$1,200?
I think it's 1,800.
Oh, okay, so,
Yeah.
So there's some other kind of ambulance that costs a whole lot more than this. Like, my son came back from Park City once, and it was like 10 grand.
If it's, for example, he's being transported from Park City facility to a Salt Lake facility, then there's mileage that can tie to it, and there's certain levels. I had a daughter
And
that
he was
was
like going across or some independent thing, they charged me more.
I had a daughter who was life flighted, and talk about take your breath away when you open up one of those life flight things.
$200,000.
Yeah, it's pretty pricey.
So, but we have approximately 50% of our transports that are Medicare and Medicaid. Just so you know. And then that remaining 50% is about 35-15 between self-pay and commercial. Which tells you a lot about what type of patients you're transporting as far as, and the amount of dollars.
What do people in rural communities do? I mean, far away where there is no, they just get themselves there or down. Yeah, thank you, Mayor, thank you for that easy answer to this question, sorry about that.
They have a really big cemetery.
Yeah.
So our collection rate is roughly 45% of the total bill.
So not only do you build little, we don't pay you in the end anyway.
So, I mean, we talk about running a government organization like a business, and we do strive for efficiencies, there's no doubt about it, but even in our fire service where we bill for services, cost recovery is on the very, very low end. It definitely is a public service that we provide to our customers, and we do it well, and we take pride in the fact that they are getting the best care they can. You talk about a lot of these rural kind of agencies, very, very rarely will they have paramedic service.
Of course.
It's not uncommon for us to have 2 or 3 paramedics on one medical call, because the certifications that our firefighters have are significantly different and better than many jurisdictions.
Thank you for allowing me to clarify some more.
Yeah, you bet. We'll move on to development services. We have $16,000 budgeted. Thank you. For a pickup truck that we're going to repurpose from stormwater. Parks, we have a little riding mower we're going to repurpose from stormwater for $10,000. We have a 1-ton truck with utility bed, $56,000, and then we have another riding mower that we're going to outright purchase for $22,000. You kind of see the difference there between the repurposed for $10,000 versus the $22,000 that we're outright purchasing. That kind of shows what the repurpose can do for the general fund. Now in police, we have $667,000 budgeted for the police department. We're going to get 2 hybrid patrol vehicles, sport utility vehicles. Those have been out for about 2 years, and they're having good reports from other departments. And then 6 patrol vehicles, just utility vehicles that are non-hybrid. And then we have 7 vehicles that we're throwing into the lease here, and we'll talk about those here in shortly. In fact, here we are with the leasing program. We're gonna do two different ideas. Bain Corp is a company that we've used for a few years, especially the task force, that has come back and done well for us. So we're gonna throw out, you had the question, why are we gonna replace a vehicle with only, 33,000 miles on it? What we're gonna do is lease that. We're gonna sell that vehicle, and then we're gonna lease that vehicle along with some of the others and see what that does for us. We should be able to resell those in 2 years and cover most of the cost, and in essence, maybe cheaper than if we outright buy them. When we compare to what we've been doing with Bain Corp with the task force, it's looking like that may be a better option. And rather than just throw in and go with everything, we're gonna try these 2 lower mile vehicles as kind of a trial run of what can we get for these 2 Explorers, and where will that get us. So one will be the fire, one of their admin vehicles, and then in police, we have a set team vehicle that functions with the task force. They put a lot of miles on theirs. We have an admin vehicle here and a support services vehicle with evidence technician, and that's gonna be through Bain Corp. And then we're gonna try another program here, and other cities have done this. We're gonna do our Orem leasing program, and this, basically, we're gonna look to cut out the middleman. So we have an animal control truck, a support services vehicle, and 2 investigations vehicles. Now with this plan, you'll see here, we have to get vehicles that people want to buy. We're gonna have to get a little bit better options on them. F-150 crew cab has been very popular, and so we're looking to probably use that model, and we'll have either the XLT or possibly the Lariat option. Basically kind of copying what Bain Corp does with their vehicles, and then we would in 2 years resell those and try again. Maybe I shouldn't say try again, but we'll be purchasing new vehicles. So from that, I believe we're down to the enterprise funds.
So does GM not have a good leasing program?
GM?
Ford there.
No, they're not.
Well, GM, for example, the police package on a GM Tahoe is significantly more in price than a Ford
Well, because it's
Explorer.
not a lot better than Explorer, but.
Task Force does have some GM vehicles through Bain Corp that they are working to.
I'm just saying, because, I mean, except I'm not a Ford fan, you can't tell by now.
I mean, the other thing we do, we're trying to standardize so our mechanics aren't operating on all kinds of different models of vehicles. They can get used to working on similar type, but I think they found.
By that, I mean, replace with the love of Tahoe, I mean, that would be. Yeah, it's better than Explorer, I think.
In the street lighting, in moving the enterprise funds, we have a bucket truck that we're gonna have a sinking fund for, save $100,000 this year, and then next year, it'll be roughly the same number. We'll be purchasing that in fiscal year FY24. Stormwater, we have 7 backhoes through the different enterprise funds, and so you'll see that keep popping up. That's on a buyback program. This is also a sinking fund that we will be saving $11,000 for the next 3 years for. And then we have a street sweeper. We already have a sinking fund set up that we saved money for that for 2 years, and this is the 3rd final year for $100,000. A pickup for $31,000. The riding mower that we are going to repurpose to parks, that's the cost for the stormwater to purchase that. And then we have a jet rod, or a big sewer truck that we also have a sinking fund for. This is year 2 of 3 of saving $200,000 in that sinking fund.
It costs a lot of money.
Can you just explain on one of those, how you're saving that money? I don't miss that. Like on the last one.
Like jet rodder?
Yeah.
Last year, we put in somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000 in a sinking fund.
So it's in an account. So we budget in an account. That money doesn't get spent. So then that money, we have the revenue to cover that expenditure, right? Well, that revenue then is then still available, those dollars got put in a savings account, if you will, right? I got paid, I didn't use it, and I put it in my savings account. Then the next year, I do the same thing again, now I have not only the first $150,000, now I've added $200,000 to it, now I have $350,000 in my savings account. I do it again the third year, and now I have all the money, all the cash money that I need in order to pay for that vehicle when it is now needed to be purchased.
So is it truly saving?
So we're putting money away, saving meaning putting it away, not like a cost reduction.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I,
You're saving the expense off the general fund, because you're gonna set aside in the savings fund, so you're saving the money in advance.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, so saving, not necessarily cost reduction, saving meaning we're putting it away to buy it later.
We're essentially encumbering the money.
Yeah.
In each respective fund.
Yeah.
In anticipation of purchasing this case, the jet rod truck in 3 years.
Does it ever get reallocated, or do you follow these goals?
Well,
We followed these goals.
Well, for example, we've had some of these funds where we'll go to Thane and this vehicle is scheduled for replacement 1 year, but Thane says, I think we can get another year out of it. So the money just sits in the fund until we need to replace it.
It's basically a sinking fund, right?
yeah, that's what we refer to them as, when we're talking about saving the dollars, that's what we refer to as.
I think it's been very effective. We start planning early is basically what we're doing and smoothing the amounts that we need to save for 3 years on the jet truck. So,
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, thank you.
thank you. Water reclamation, another backhoe, and they also have 3 jet rodders down there. And anyway, another sinking fund. This will be the final year, 3 of 3, of $118,000 to make up the final amount that we need there. A pickup truck and then a utility vehicle that they drive around the plant to service the equipment down there. And now to the water section. They have 3 backhoes in the buyback program. 1-ton 4-wheel drive truck for $60,000, a half-ton pickup, an air compressor. That was one of the older vehicles that Jamie referred to. 3/4-ton truck, and then the hydro excavator. This vehicle here, we're actually saving maybe quite already. This is first year of 6 years, so that $100,000 that we save, and then we continue to probably put in $100,000 each year for 6 years. On the streets, 2 backhoes. We have a front-end loader that's also in the buyback program that we're going to put $50,000 into the fund there, and then we have a 10-wheel dump truck. That's the 1985 that Jamie talked about a minute ago. Snow plow and sander. This is a sinking fund also. Year 1 of 2, $200,000 that we saved this year. And that pretty much sums it up. This is the same as the first slide. 1 million in general fund and 1.2 in enterprise funds, with a total of around 2.2 million is what we proposed for vehicle pricing this year.
How does that compare to previous years, the $2.2 million?
We can go back to that slide and it'll show.
Thank you, I'm sorry, I wasn't fresh on my mind when you showed it.
So 2.2 is the enterprise. Oh, okay. These are kind of split in half here, general fund. So we're proposing $1 million, roughly general fund.
Which is less than the average of the last 5 years, it looks like.
Yeah. And then if you want to look at the enterprise funds, we are more.
Yeah.
But now when you get back a couple, 3-4 years.
But the total vehicle replacement is about average of the last 4 or
Yes.
5 years, thank you.
We typically keep our general fund vehicle replacement at about 850 to 900,000, with the exception of fire trucks.
Yeah, because they're.
So you'll see those, the years
They're
where
an
we're close,
outlier.
yeah, the
Yep.
years where we're close to $2 million or
Yep.
million
You
seven,
did a
those are
fire
fire
truck or
trucks.
something, yeah.
And we've been fortunate in the last 6 years, we paid cash for all of our fire trucks, where in times past, we've entered into
That's
financing.
because we use good Fords instead of those cars.
Yeah. One point I want to say on the lease buyback we need to sell. General Motors is mostly a higher resale value. They maintain their value. They don't appreciate as much as Fords. Fords are always soft, so you might want to look at that because you might not be getting them same for your buck.
We'll get together and talk about GM a little more.
The interesting part is
You can have a
most
lot
of the
of
leasing companies in the country is actually push forward, so I don't know how to answer that.
Who's pushing Fords?
Most of the leasing companies are using.
Because they're selling their soul to Ford.
There's no room for unholder opinions.
Gotta be it.
There you go.
Dave, you're never
It's
passionate
a record
about
show, I own a
anything.
Chevy, Dave, so.
Check.
He owns this every.
And I'm a diesel, so I'm not even there.
hired about a Ford, so there you go. Okay, I'll move on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In the
I
general.
think we're up, we'll go to the next item.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's go ahead and move on to Chris Sherfy. For presentation.
Online, he was.
Read
Chris
one
was
line.
on,
He's online.
on Teams or whatever we're using.
So it comes.
Chris is waiting to go. Oh, there he comes.
Okay.
So Chris, you should be able to share your screen, no problem.
Okay.
Look at us, we're all like, we gotta stretch.
What's wrong with you?
You good, Chris?
We like that sports.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. I wish I was following Brandon. I thought his joke on the cemetery was awesome. I thought he killed it, so,
Nice.
Yeah, okay. Hey, I've been asked tonight to talk to you about some of the sewer rate history and philosophy. We had a discussion a couple meetings ago regarding ADUs and whether or not the city should implement or charge a fee for the sewer base rate for those units, and wanted to give you an update and kind of give you some background on some of the discussions we've had in the past. In 2014, we started a process by hiring Bowen Collins and Associates to do our sewer, water, and stormwater master plans. And as a part of that, we knew that the rates will need to be adjusted to accommodate the capital facility needs that we'd have in our respective utilities. And as such, we met with the city council and presented a concept to them that would allow us to generate income a little bit differently, and by way of charging every single living unit the sewer base rate. And I'm going to provide some background on that. This is kind of the time frame or the schedule that was implemented back in 2014, 15, and 16. This presentation is actually that presentation I gave about 6 years ago to the city council. And so this will give you that information firsthand. Basically, though, I wanted to start off and make sure that we all understood the two different sewer rates that are billed to everybody in the city. You have the sewer base rate and the sewer volume rate. So the volume rate is based on an estimated amount of water used on a monthly basis. And how we do that is we look at the total indoor water consumption from the months of November through March. And then prospectively in the following fiscal year, starting July 1st, we'll use that value and calculate it, back calculate it as an average monthly volume. Then that gets billed prospectively from July through the following June. And so that's how sewer volume rates are actually calculated. There is no way to actually meter or calculate the flows from each home for that kind of a pipe size and volumes that we're talking about. For larger flows, we do use flow meters. The base rate is just a rate that is charged on a per unit basis today. It was back then, it was charged on a per account basis. And so the discussion was, what would it generate for us in terms of revenues, and how would that help us to offset future cost increases if we were to look at this? It appeared that there was a subsidy that had been occurring, and we wanted to kind of get a handle on that and get a feel for how much of a subsidy was actually occurring. This is a typical service bill that you see, that you receive if you get a paper bill. This is the older style, but this was back in 2015. You can see on there, it's highlighted, there's a base rate and there's also the sewer charge. And the base rate, as mentioned, it's charged for the privilege of being able to connect to a public sewer facility. And the sewer system, the facility has to be designed to peak values, so maximum values, and that'll need to be required to be able to accommodate the developments that are occurring in the respective areas throughout the city. So again, you need to look at this through the lens of 2015. The commentary here, I haven't really updated that, but back then, as I presented this, the problem that we identified was that there appeared to be a subsidy that was occurring, and cost of service principles that we follow, it conflicted with those principles that everyone pays their fair share to operate and maintain the facility and to repair and to replace it into the future. I'm going to skip through this a little bit quickly since I think I need to be done around 5 o'clock and I have 2 presentations to make. Jamie, do I have more time than to go to 5, or?
You're okay. I would make it,
Okay.
I wouldn't get carried away.
Okay.
You have a 501 then?
All right. Trying to be respectful of your time. So the solution was we felt like it was imperative that we charge every single living unit the same base rate. So if it was a single family home back in 2016, the fee was $9.32 a month for that home. If there was a 12-plex prior to 2016, that 12-plex for all 12 units would pay $9.32. So divide that by 12, and that's how much each unit effectively was paying. We didn't feel like that was perhaps the best way to go or to continue that plan, that we needed to correct that and rectify that. And that was a concern that we identified as a part of our master plan in 2015. The non-residential component of it as well was evaluated, and we made some adjustments with that. Mixed-use developments accommodated both philosophies of per-door basis. We have, I think, 4 mixed-use developments in the city. One of the more common ones is Midtown Village, or you have also University Crossing. And so those have combined mixed use or combined residential and non-residential or commercial uses there. So we look at those on a case-by-case basis, and we work with those directly. This is a map. We actually hired a GIS graduate to come in and work with us on this project for 6 months. He identified all of the properties that were singles, had 2 units, 3 units, 4 and 5 plus units. You can see how that's dispersed throughout the city. In the end, what was determined, or the results of the study, were that there were 21,847 database entries, and that 20,141 were residential and 1,706 were non-residential. Furthermore, we identified, I need to move this on my screen, okay, that of the total residential units, there were 7,331 that were not being billed for that sewer base rate. So the total amount of total residential units was 27,472 as compared to the 20,141 residential accounts. And so we realized that there was a significant amount to the tune of perhaps 25% or more that was being subsidized. What that equate, let's see. Okay, sorry. What that equated to was about an $800,000 increase, or in this case, it was a subsidy that was occurring. And there was a projected annual increase for non-residential of about 300,000. So by implementing that philosophy at that time, there was about $1 million increase in revenues that could be realized without raising rates across the board throughout the city. In other words, there were about 20,000 residential accounts that were unaffected in any way, but we were rectifying that subsidy that was taking place. We had estimated originally that was going to be about 500,000, at least for residential. It was about 800,000, or about 1.1 million total. We did an extensive outreach program. We submitted flyers to all of the apartment owners, the Utah Apartment Association as well. We met with them directly, and we had an extensive social media campaign. This gives you an idea of the efforts that took place at that time. There were about 1,000 emails to businesses, multifamilies, 806 robocalls, and also a significant number of mailers that went out to all of the residents in the city of Orem that looked like what I just showed you. Even robocalls were used, which are a bit taboo, but they were implemented as well, and we reached out. We had really good public input and support, including outreach to the Utah Apartment Association with the help of Stephen Downs. We reached out to that association, and one of the takeaways that I'd like to represent is that they said that our system, what's highlighted here, it says your system, meaning Orem's system, would be like what everyone else already does. And so the Apartment Association said that essentially, yeah, we don't like it necessarily because you're one of the few that doesn't do it that way, but this is essentially how everyone else does it. And how everyone else did it was what we thought was fair and most equitable, as I think you would agree. But this is the main slide I wanted to present to you for your discussion and determination. As I mentioned earlier, about a month ago, we had the discussion regarding accessory dwelling units. I looked on our website today and it said that we had 711 legal accessory dwelling units in the city of Orem. There are probably quite a few that are not legal, that are not identified. But that equates to about a $97,000 annual revenue if we were to implement the same philosophy with the ADUs as we do with other multifamily dwellings that we have been doing since 2016. Again, that subsidy back in 2016 was realized to be about $820,000 annually, with 7,331 residential units that were not billed for a sewer base rate. So this leads to the discussion, and a decision that needs to be made is whether or not to go forward with continuing to build the ADUs. I know there was concern about making that as financially feasible or practical for those that live in those ADUs, and I would suggest and recommend that we continue with that philosophy that we've implemented back in 2016 and still allow them to have a reduced rate. I didn't mention this earlier, but there's a $1 reduction in rate for administrative fees that were waived as a part of the multifamily dwelling units. So I think the rate today is like $12.30. It would be around $11.30 for each additional dwelling unit in those homes. So with that, I'd like to open this up for discussion.
There's already a penalty, if you will, on those who are legal with their dwelling unit. And this would be another penalty for being legal. I think we force more of them underground. So I'm not in favor of this because I just don't want to have one more reason for people to say, I'm not even going to tell you I have a rental unit. So that would be my thought on it.
You're talking specifically about the accessory dwelling.
Accessory dwelling unit,
not
yeah.
the multi.
Not the multifamily, because there there's no secret that there's a 12-plex there, right? Right now, if I rent out quietly to two people in my basement, you don't know about it. But if I register, I have a $9 or $11 a month penalty, and the other penalties, I have to pay you $50 a year, and all those other kind of penalties. I just don't think we want to force people off the grid. Debbie and I went to an economist, and the higher you raise the tax, the more people cheat. And I just don't think we ought to give another reason to them for hiding. I won't call it cheating, just hiding.
Is there a separate hookup when you have an ADU?
No.
It's just your house?
Yeah.
It's not like a lot of the other ones there?
Yeah, so if I have 8 kids living in my house, we're using the sewer system pretty heavily. If it's just Kay and I, we rent to 2 others, we're using it no more heavily, and yet we'd be paying a penalty by having 2 separate units and having an ADU.
And I think that was an email I said, back in the day, the guy said, hey, I'm not renting it, we're not even renting it, and I'm getting an extra charge on my bill. So, yeah, I think I agree with Tom.
Plus, I know they're all driving GMCs, Dave.
No, yeah, they probably
Yeah,
are.
they are all responsible people driving GMCs.
So Tom, would you suggest that we pass this cost on to everyone else and increase rates then to make it revenue neutral?
No, I think you ought to charge everyone with a family unit over 5 a higher price. I mean, that's really what we're saying, and by the way, that was tongue in cheek if this is being recorded. I think we're not gonna charge by people for a house.
You said that.
Yeah, Terry Peterson, TRRY. So, yeah, I mean, you can say that, but it's not, if I have 8 children in my home versus 2 families of 2, where's the extra cost? I don't see it.
Well, and I see it happen in just the scenario that you gave in my neighborhood where it's, they're empty nesters now, so now they're gonna rent out the basement.
And arguably, they're using the sewer system less than when they had house full.
Usage is based on the production rate, not the base rate, just to keep that in mind. So if you use more, then you do pay more. And that will come out as more of an equity in the form of paying for that usage and the production that's generated at that home. This is the cost of and the privilege to be able to connect to a system, whether you use it or not, to be able to use it for that potential is part of the criteria, I think, that was evaluated.
But if I have a single family home with 4 bathrooms, I've already paid the price to connecting, whether it's 2 families living there or 1 large family.
However, there are existing fixed costs, right?
Yeah, but I've already incurred that when I built the house and hooked up and it's 4-bedroom home.
Only to get you to the road.
Right.
It's only your lateral. There's fixed costs with our capital in the main line under the road from there as well.
Yeah, and what causes that cost to go up? Usage or how many people, families are living there?
Well, I think part of it though is based on the assumptions that you're making. For example, to Renee's point, the suggestion is, well, there used to be a 6-person family there. Now we're replacing it with a two family.
Yeah.
So we have 2 units, 4 people versus 1 unit, 6 people. So really, are we incurring any additional impact? In that scenario, no. But what if whoever we are renting to invites a family of 6 to live in their basement? And then there's a family of 2 that lives on the first floor. So it's not predictable.
Yeah, it's not predictable.
But the infrastructure costs what it costs. And that's a fixed rate. And that's what we're trying to spread across as many units as possible. So that's why Chris is saying that $97,000 needs to go somewhere.
You want to pay user fee instead of a citywide covering those few users, is what you're saying, right?
But we either charge for that essentially in the volume.
Which we already are.
Not the $97,000.
Where we are now.
We're already paying for the cost somehow now.
Yeah, we're charging ADUs $97,000.
So the volume's covered no matter what, we're just talking about the connections, right?
Yeah.
So
if we reduce revenue and connections, we've got to make it somewhere in order to be a revenue.
So do we increase the base rate across all of the remaining, customers to cover that $97,000?
Which would probably be a relatively minimal amount.
Yeah, do we know what that would be?
Well, I mean, you take 20, for example, 27,000 customers less the 711. and then you spread the 97,000 across the remaining 26,600.
It's about 30 cents per unit per month,
$3.5 a month.
if you look at the base rate.
But I guess the argument, the policy argument is you have somebody who's running, essentially has an accessory dwelling, they're running their basement like a business, making money. So they're charging, let's say, $1,000 a month to rent this basement. And is the additional service cost to provide that sewer connection, should that be borne by the business owner? Or should that be borne by all the other residential customers who are not running a business in their home?
And this is a little bit beyond this discussion, but the city can no longer charge impact fees for internal ADUs under state law. So
they're not paying the cost to connect.
And I would say that was probably the bigger obstacle for somebody to become legal, is they were gonna have to pay thousands in impact fees, and they won't be doing that now. That was, from those that I knew of or heard of that weren't legal, it was, they were worried, they knew they were gonna have to pay thousands in impact fees. And so
Do we no longer charge the $50 a year for it?
that's the rental license fee. We're talking an impact fee of thousands to the
So
connection.
right now it's costing $50 to be legal,
Correct.
and it will cost them another $120 a year to be legal.
Yeah, at $10 a month.
Create an accessory dwelling unit, they're not subject to thousands of dollars in connection fees, in connection impact.
And were they in Orem before that legislature?
Yes, they were.
What was that, how much was it roughly?
So between 3,000 and 5,000.
Okay.
Is that, do they also get were the inspections abolished with that, where they had to go in and before they could have a legal?
No, building inspections taught, so, yeah. There were a few code changes that took place, for example, a double sheetrock layer for fire separation, I believe that one eliminated. Some other code modifications, that was the prior legislature.
And that's the legal ones, right? The people who just are doing it.
It's much easier to become.
Last year was like 120 for budget.
Or you think it's yours
because of not charging impact fees.
So Chris, what's the increase per resident?
If we applied the 97,000 across 27,000 units, it's 30 cents a month increase on the base rate.
Or it's $11 just for the ADU. Yeah.
Hey, Chris, do you remember what the total sewer budget is?
I don't have that handy here.
I don't know if you know off the top of your head. Otherwise, Steve, you can look it up.
Yeah, if you could look it up.
But right now, we're talking only about 711 houses, because that's all that's registered, right?
Yes, correct.
That's right.
And what determines at what point does it become a renter, just if we're paying like rent? I mean, if your kids live there, whoever lives there.
Part of why some people do it is because it increases the equity value in your home or the resale value in your home. So some people will do it right before they sell it because they can say, I've got a legal accessory dwelling unit. Others will do it because they want to be able to freely advertise that they've got an ADU in their, that they want to rent out their basement. Now, sometimes there's vacancy, right? And if they're more sophisticated, they'll take that into account of the total cost of providing a rental unit. Most don't. So I think we actually get the complainers of those of having to pay it when there is a vacancy.
And it's not, in those 711 houses, they don't become legal, right? It's absorbed through whoever the owner is.
Yes, so you noticed before, it was, we were only charging the base rate per account. Now it's per unit. It's not, that's why there was the subsidy before. So it's all on one utility billing account.
Say that again, so how are you gonna do that if it's vacant for a while?
So I'm just saying, those are the people that are probably complaining about having to pay.
So is there a process for that? Like, can they call you and say, take that off, I'm not renting now, or?
No.
They can become non-legal, so then we would stop.
Yes.
But we
we can't rely on them letting us know.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Illegal apartments are
We know.
versus the 711.
I got like 4 in my neighborhood.
A lot more than 7-Eleven.
We'd love to know some of the addresses.
It tends to be based on if the neighbors like them or not.
It does.
Right.
But a landlord could write this off, right, as a cost of doing business when they do their taxes, so it's not like, we're just sticking it to them, they can say, okay,
It's a business, right?
it's a business,
Well,
yeah.
they raise the rent, I mean, they get charged a little bit more.
Yeah, but when you go to your account, you're gonna say, these are my expenses.
We can tell them they're helping them by giving them a tax deduction.
Well, I'm just saying, it's not like you're just eating it.
We won't see rents go down $11 a month.
Teach in one case.
Yeah,
So.
they'll probably just pass it on, and they'll round it up higher, they'll go, the city's charging me,
25.
it's 25, I have to go up,
So I get what Tom's saying, but I really think that, you know, if that's you're the user, you should pay the fee, you know?
My issue is just how big of a hassle it is for the landlord, if it's a hassle or not. I mean, like the whole $50 thing with that whole scenario, that kind of turns into a big hassle for a lot of landlords. So I'm just curious if this is just like.
No, this shows up on their normal bill.
So it's not,
This isn't.
it's just a cost, then it's not like as annoyance as the other one.
And the $50 one just shows up as a bill too.
Well, it's not the $50, it's the merging your bills with their bills. Like your renter shows up on your bill and then they don't pay and then.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying,
Yeah.
but at least we don't get stick with the bill, nice to happen.
I mean, we are asking landlords or people that have a renter to be more responsible and accountable. And we find that there's less absenteeism and that they care more when there is something to do that happens there that we care about, like potential crimes or appearance thereof.
So the only thing that triggers this then is this register, right?
It's a known, yeah, accessory dwelling unit. And we continue to find them. Our NIT team gets reports on them often, and we go out and find them.
So I guess, council, this was a matter that you requested we bring forward. I think the decision point is, do we remain as currently, programmed with continuing to assess these ADUs with the base rate, or do we make a change, or do you make a change? That change would involve currently 711 legal accessory units, and there would be a cost of approximately $97,000 tied to it. And making the change, then that $97,000 would be spread across all the other ratepayers throughout the community to cover that gap.
And you're saying otherwise it would be borne just by everyone in Orem who's not in this program, the overall rate goes up.
Correct.
So it's either assessing where the cost is or just letting everyone else pay for it?
Correct.
So everybody pays 30 cents, or these guys pay $11 or $12?
Right.
Correct.
No, is that right?
For the assessment?
Yeah.
That's good, yeah, that will rest.
30 cents a month.
30 cents a month, yeah.
30 cents a month or $11 a month, those are actually those. So those that have gone to the trouble of legalizing it as an accessory dwelling unit and rent it, essentially use their home or their basement as a business.
Okay, so clarify for me again. So I have this unit, it's legal, I've got it registered, I rent it, and then I decide I want to take a year off. Am I still paying the $10, $11?
If they want to stay legal.
So, and then is there if I want to say I'm not going to be legal for a year or two? If I want to get legalized again, am I just under whatever's in place at that time ordinance-wise to be legal?
They will need to interact with our 311 utility billing, I guess.
Yeah, see, that's actually an interesting thing, because how the situation used to be is legal ones wanted to stay legal because they got in generally before impact fees started being charged.
Okay.
If they would become non-legal and then become legal again, they knew they were gonna have to pay impact fees. Now the impact fees won't be a play, yeah, you probably, I mean, I don't know how this is gonna work out, but
That's the question, right?
that becomes very different of, I'm gonna become non-legal for a year, and there's no real, barrier to me becoming, to kind of jumping in and out.
In and
That's something that we have, you're bringing up something we haven't even thought of, you know, since this impact fee changed about 3 weeks ago, so.
The only barrier really is just the transaction cost, or going through
The
the
time.
trouble of figuring it out.
Yeah, and then there's a new inspection and stuff, I don't know that.
And frankly, we would expect.
Is there
property-
incentives for people to come into compliance? In other words, is there a fine that I would incur if you
Yeah.
catch me?
Yes, yeah, there
What's
is.
that fine?
Well, usually so we're working with people right now, we give them some time, it can be up to $50 a day if you're found in violation and you continue to do it, but the issue, and sorry, I know we're taking way more time, so this may be another discussion at another time. The issue generally that we've always run into is we find this illegal basement apartment. There's two families at play, there's the person who's renting it illegally, there's the family renting it having no idea that they were renting illegal, and we have tried to work to keep that family housed while it becomes legal. So we have a policy in place that we utilize in our IT to say, okay, is the lease coming up? If the lease is coming up, then that's your deadline, and if you rent past that, you're done. If you're in the middle of you just started a 1-year lease, then you've got to show us in 30 days that you started the process of becoming legal. And then there's milestones. So it gets a little complicated. We want to keep the family that had no idea they were renting an illegal house, because they got a KSL and they're not thinking, well, let me search to make sure this is legal, right?
You just wanna find a roof.
Yeah.
So as a matter of principle, for me, I think it is only fair that we spread that out over all of the users versus having everyone, and I know we're talking cents, but just as a matter of principle, I feel like it's fair to spread that over all of the users versus having everyone pay for 711 people that are getting the benefit but aren't.
Meaning that ADU, the 711, spread it
Yes.
out, and they're paying out like.
But it is 1,711, there's 1,850, and we don't know about 1,040 of them.
Right. And so hopefully, I mean, best case scenario, and I know that that's.
And they're not
But
talking
when
to you
they
from
run
now,
for
did they come legal?
$120 a year, are they gonna lose and jeopardize the chance of things being put in the meantime where they're not legal? For $120 a year.
People aren't going to necessarily, unless they don't want the trouble, they're not necessarily gonna proactively come in and become legal. Or unless they're about to sell it and they wanna increase the value of the home. However, we can still respond in a reactive way, and when we find situations where there's too many people or unsafe situations, then we mobilize our NIT team, and then in a reactive way, we get people to become.
Wait, so that's the only two? So if they're not legal, you can't tell them they can't rent it? It's only if they're too many people or?
Those are just two examples.
Yeah, but if it's just not legal, you can't tell them they can't release,
Correct.
have a lease in the next.
If I'm renting my home and I can have three non-related people.
Correct.
So I can rent my home and I'm renting bedrooms.
Right.
But it's my house and I'm renting, so is that considered the 7-Eleven on the legal accessory dwelling, or am I free?
That'd be just a single family rental.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is mainly people who stood up and said, I'm renting my apartment, my house downstairs. I mean, they're doing it, they've got a rent set for it, they gotta agree committed if they're registered and the whole bit, right? So to me, that's a little different than just all these random situations going on. I mean, that's more legit running a business than whatever. So, I don't know, I can see it both ways. But it seemed like where these guys are really committed and they're running and they've registered, that cost could be borne by them. Be more fair, the charge who's using it.
Why would they flinch at that? I mean, they will when you implement it, right? Because they're not paying it now, but then it's just like.
They'll just add it to their rent, and then we're like gonna be thrown from affordable housing.
Yeah.
It's been in place like this for 6 years.
And frankly, those who are dishonest will continue to be dishonest. I mean, we have customers who benefit from our garbage services, for example. and they have 2 garbage cans, and they know they're only being charged for 1. But we don't do an audit every year, and in fact, we're in the process of doing an audit now, or in the short term, and we're gonna find probably, I don't know, 750 people who have 2 garbage cans and are only being charged for 1. Those that are dishonest will continue to be dishonest. Those that are honest will comply.
So how do you bring this to a conclusion?
Well, I guess the decision point is, do we keep the fees as is, or do we make a modification and essentially not assess the base rate to those 711 customers who have accessory dwelling units, and then take that cost and spread it across our entire utility population?
So option 1 is everybody pays for it.
We stay the course.
Everyone pays for those units. Option 2 is those units pay for their cost for sewer, and it's just the specific units are registered running into business.
Yeah, and as we find more, they will have to, we will charge those too. And I'd imagine we'd amend as part of our budget, if we had to adjust the fees accordingly.
So what do you think?
Option 2.
So the 97, where'd that come from? Is that just?
That's just
cost of sewer?
Yeah.
Okay.
That 97,000 has been loaded into the cost of operations and capital replacement, so.
So it doesn't matter if it's accessory or not, we need 97,000.
We have costs, yes.
So Jamie, from a procedural point of view, do you want the city council to vote on this tonight?
Well, I mean, I don't, obviously this is a work meeting, so we don't take votes.
Right.
No vote is necessary if you say, let's maintain the status quo. If you make a decision to change what we are currently doing, then we would actually have to amend our budget, we'd amend our fee schedule, there'd be a public hearing, noticing provisions, so on and so forth.
I mean, I would suggest, obviously, we would just include it as part of maybe
Or,
our budget, start July 1.
So when they approve the budget, they approve the change if they
Correct.
make this change?
Correct.
So that there's really no action the city council needs to do other than say, we'd like to go in this.
Kind of a head nod, either way.
Okay.
Yeah, I am concerned that if I have a legal, dwelling unit, it's legal and I'm all registered, and then I'm not renting it, and then I'm still paying the bill, there's gotta be an opt-out, and you're saying, no, you just say you're legal non-conforming. To me, it's not a letter.
I don't know, so that they would have to just come back and say, I don't want to be legal anymore. I don't want to be a legal accessory dwelling anymore.
Until I rent it again, or?
Until I rent it again.
So we just have to
We'll just
know.
turn it off.
Which, yeah, I mean, I don't think we can play the game of, hey, let us know there's a month you're not renting it to somebody.
No, I'm just saying,
But if they're gonna say, I'm not gonna rent it for a year or 2 because we need the space now. Most often it's, hey, I had it, now my kids are grown, I need the space. Then they can come in and let us know that they're no longer, and we will make them no longer a legal basement apartment. And then when they're ready, they can come back and.
And maybe my thought is maybe we take this offline and talk amongst ourselves as a council, and then go from there. Because I'm sort of with Tom at the moment, sort of.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Yeah, I mean, right now we can stay the course as is, and say that as part of the tentative budget and to be adopted budget. Within those discussions, if we want to make a change, then we should make that change.
So then if you're good, I think we'll stay the course until we hear differently.
We could even show next council meeting. We'll talk in the meantime, and maybe next council, maybe we just have a quick.
Yep.
Because it needs to come to a resolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be best. Because then
So the conversation will be had in private rather than public?
Yeah, you can't talk more than 2 of us at a time.
Okay, so let's do the. Go ahead.
I think it makes sense, if you're gonna charge, if you're going to publicly advertise and charge someone rent, that's a business expense. You're doing legitimate business. And so for me, it just makes sense that if I'm doing that, I'm going to expect there to be some expenses, part of which is water and sewer. And I don't feel that it's fair to push that off on the rest of the citizenry of Orem. if I'm gonna do that, I would expect to pay my fair share of that. So I would be in favor of option two, unless.
I agree with that.
And I think also, but I like what we're saying about, it would be nice to have the opt-out, like, if for some reason I'm not gonna be doing that. If I'm not gonna be renting space in my home, then it would be nice to have the option to come to the city and say, hey, I'm not gonna be renting, can you take this charge off of my bill? And then when I re-up, we'll hook up again, and then you can start charging me.
So what if we look at what the process of that looks like now, becoming legal?
So the process right now is to file an affidavit with the county and how to remove from the records the other premises.
Okay.
There is a $50 fee to do that currently, and that's for staff time and the county recording fee.
Just that one-time fee to do it.
Which is $40 now, though.
Which becomes worth it if you're gonna be doing it for an extended period of time.
Well, it means you're committed to, you're not.
Exactly.
Every vacancy.
Exactly, so that actually probably helps us in this situation.
So, I mean, we got 4 people that are in favor, but.
I agree with Jeff.
So we'd stay the course.
No.
We have 3.
No.
Oh, yeah.
I'm counting 3.
I would agree.
Mayor
with
Young
those
is
guys.
the other 2.
So.
And
So I
I'm thinking
think-
more with, I don't like the idea of having to go legal to non-legal. I don't like that idea.
Well, you don't have to.
It wouldn't be going legal to non-legal, it would be going legal and staying legal, just changing your status.
Yeah.
Not legal or non-legal, but.
You would have to declare
landlord
that you're
versus
not gonna
non-landlord.
rent.
Well, but, I mean, it just, maybe it's a 6-month thing, then you gotta pay the $50 to take it off in 6 months, and you're rent 6 months, I mean.
But
And they
that's
decide
the cost of
as
doing
a
business.
Business operator, yeah.
So I think the city, because of people who want to switch back and forth to understand, you know what, if you just are in between renters, you don't want to do that.
Yeah, I agree.
So you're better off just to pay it for a few months to get to rent it.
No, I
That's
think
where
you're right.
$50 stops, really.
Yeah.
I mean, once you're charging them $50, why don't you charge them 60 and call it good, no worry about it.
I'm sure I understand.
If you're legal,
This is $10
you're
a
paying.
month, not just $10 once.
Yeah.
It's
Oh, yeah,
$120 a year.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Are we good?
Chris also have to handle water tonight too?
Yes.
So why we?
Can we go eat?
So what we need to do, yes.
Or we can we can put this on the next agenda, Mayor. We don't have to, if you would like to put this next item on the next agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I think we got 4 there.
No, I
said
mean,
the
the
next.
next discussion.
Water to your
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah,
Let's
the
do
last
that.
15 minutes.
Chris, we'll put it on the next agenda.
Next work session?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know you did more than 15 minutes.
Yeah. So we'll have our food that's been brought in, and usually we have a prayer before this, right? Any volunteers?
Okay. Heavenly Father, we're grateful we could gather in favorable circumstances, and we're grateful for the food that's been brought in. We ask that blessing to be upon it and our actions this evening in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Go ahead and grab your food, and then we'll come back and finish this up.
I know, I thought we guys
I think you can, yeah, one of the parts, yeah.
Recommend let us know.
No, I'm just. So, yeah, it's like a ham, a couple different types of clubs, and then a turkey provolone.
It's online, it's on my Apple Watch.
That's actually okay.
No, it just needs my, it's on the dock line. Apple Watch is done. She has.
Somebody plays it now.
Still there about.
Okay.
So,
What do they say? It's not too bad. If the next one is like. Yeah, that's cool. You're lucky, you know. Yeah, exactly.
That's why
So am I seeing ham or, oh,
What was that hash alone down there, or
Turkey.
Yes.
Give me the oil vinegar guy.
so what did you say?
Well, I don't know that I could call it fun, we delegated.
Cheer on. What is she singing? Let's find out.
Is that the oil? Vinegar?
It looks like they have it, yeah.
Yeah, that is oil and vinegar. You can do mayo, mustard, oil and vinegar, or all of the above.
No, that's it.
That's actually.
That's good, it's good.
You guys are CDX.
Sorry, Jerry.
Oh, you can
Sure ran.
You don't have to do that. Don't ever do that. You walk on. Tell me.
I didn't want to get in the
Not that I'm admitting anything, but I am.
I'd like to see more, sure.
You know that $50 treasure has to show it's like crazy. It was $14.50. I'll be a good deal, huh?
My team's so probably. Because I saw today was the last day to sign up. Yeah, I used to sit
You know so much about the county.
Like Orem teachers will come to try it.
Or do you really bad? What do you want to study?
They're allowed out.
It's like,
Which one? I mean, I took the signal. It was not fiddle. He gave me a higher we want to say. And then I was. So they got the flame. Instead of right field.
Okay.
It's not that.
I went to Farrows. I went to the pool last week. It's not up, you didn't have a lifeguard. It is. I'm like, you tell me I gotta go to pool. You have no lifeguards?
I just don't want to, I can't, lifeguards. I'll get certified. So it's this lag, like a minimum lag of 6 weeks. First, you know, front desk, they're pretty quick. So I have the same way. We're getting very creative, trying to attract people.
Yeah, I knew it was real, but I'm like, oh my, how is there a fit?
And we find out.
I gotta get down.
I know that's
Do we not have supervisors in the
They are, and so at that point.
I'm really anal when it comes to that.
Leisure pool is a console. Yeah, at 5 a.m.
I have to look.
Wasn't 5 a.m., it was 10 a.m.
10 a.m. The early morning / during high school shift.
All right.
It's like last night on ice cream.
I was like,
Training schedule.
okay, here's the deal. Last time I tried to get my grandson,
Bananas and
your boiler was broken, they had to get the new one. Last week I tried to take him swimming, and there's no lifeguard. I'm like, you're making it hard.
We are.
Thank you very much. Our what? Our boilers, think of it as our boilers.
What, one day?
Okay. I figured.
We got a little second, that's my second.
I was on 2 weeks ago.
And then I got 2 and 3 was just scheduling like a process.
All right. $1 million claims, I understand. God, I'm disappointed twice.
Terrible idea, they want to love it, they hate it. Like,
You know, I'm on the radio.
No lifeguards?
I looked at it.
For the pool, additional pool stuff, like
Okay. You get the ideas that are 15 or 19 cars.
Yeah. Really want to put my arm right. It is what it
Apparently couldn't find enough.
Oh, yeah.
I just tried to make it this way. Springfield has good stuff. I don't know.
If you don't pick up 12, it's my name on it.
I've already typed it.
What if I steal my own wrist? What if I say, leave your phone? I watch my kids, well, some people know I guess. I don't know, actually, also, I don't know. Or do you know I used to?
They're just not like.
She did come in today, so I wonder if you were going out of town.
Hey, Steve, Lenny wants to comment.
Yeah, have you forget on all you can eat, have a service.
I know, that's what we want. They did like a, forced like $20 tip on it, 20% tip on it last night.
I just had a little program, last time, get back in my car and drive.
Takana's is good, I like it.
I don't like to go with that. You never say no.
Oh, yeah.
Your life's miserable after.
I can't imagine.
Neighborhood kid.
What about the other one?
I've never been.
And they.
He buys a box at the end of the day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Let's go.
It's like 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, oh, I was there, I need it all.
Yep.
After you start asking yourself questions.
Who's not my practice woman, my grandparents? One time, this time I decided to.
Yeah, which is not your fault. Then all of a sudden you get
I know. First world problems, right. Take my first world problems any day of the week. All my, where's my next meal coming from? Who's blocking me?
Yeah, that's what I thought. I think you have to read
I have like. I saw you, but I
So this is, no. Kids are kind of specifically tied in low-income areas. And they have specific requirements as to when this money is spent, as your fire department. So that's why it's on. So you need to open it up as a public hearing. There'll be kid ramps and Mr. Chair. There'll be.
I understand frustration, right?
The other changes. These are scheduled items, so there's only, there's 2 items on the consent agenda. open meeting minutes.
We know.
Voter participation area.
I mean, I was some parties that for many years. GMs they got money.
It's not our best use of that property.
That's what. Information.
I'll take this out.
I see, yeah, the deal is now, it's like, okay, we gotta use, yeah, we ready to.
Oh, you realize that? Money yesterday, my daughter ran. That's where you go. I buy all my dresses. Right. Nice to meet you. I got all that. And they have dresses there. Try something like that.
I want to.
I throw it online.
There are issues that.
I mean, how to play, but
That was the biggest thing.
And then I work.
I'm not gonna go, I just had to get back to you, don't worry, there's something else. See if I really, catching it my daughter buy 2 dresses there. I make her out.
Yeah.
Yes. I bought all my footwear.
That's good. Ever going to Springfield?
Yeah.
Like,
Professional clothes there. So yeah.
yeah.
They have amazing brand.
The brand.
Yeah.
Right.
I know, and I honestly don't think, take it in 3 years. It's exactly.
It's probably got a really well tested.
That's funny, I haven't thought about going over there.
I'm super glad.
Tomorrow. Just for one of them, I will buy a roll of
I'll let you.
Can't you wear the same dress tomorrow?
Yeah, I don't.
Well. Yeah, sometimes you say. Whatever you want. I want my prom dress before prom from here, I wouldn't say like. Well, again, when you're, it's only daughters. That's why you can be a sucker all you want. You're nice, you're nice. You can trade it out however you want.
Little blustery.
Temperatures.
I don't know my cousin. I don't know what it is. She went to Mojave.
Half on the lunch and take a full one.
That was my boobs. Oh, I believe it. I believe it. Oh my God, I got a good education.
Yeah, I left with Cheetos and ended up with a full sandwich.
All right, we better wrap up here. We've got a pretty easy meeting tonight. We've got the general things, and then as far as the, what is this resolution of voter participation areas under the consent item?
This is the item where, for referendum and initiative efforts, we are required to divide our community into 8 sections. And we were required to do that with the new census data.
Right, and that's what they showed us.
Yeah, she showed us, yeah.
And so the county actually did that for us.
So we're just mentioning that on the consent item and approving.
We're adopting it.
Now, we have to do that by resolution?
There is a resolution.
Is that difficult to do it instead of just?
Yes. Yeah, you vote by resolution, right? So if you're not enacting an ordinance and passing the ordinance, then your actions are usually expressed in resolution.
Okay.
So how's this presented? I mean, it just says
It is.
resolution.
It's on the consent.
So does it say we've got a resolution
Yeah.
for this?
So if all of you are fine with it, then.
Unless one of us moves it on.
Yeah, so you'll vote on the meeting minutes and then the voter participation area resolution together as one, just as the consent items.
Okay.
So if I want to discuss something,
You can take it out of consent and put it on the calendar.
but I just want to say something about it in the meeting. Like if I have a comment to make about the minutes.
Oh, then
So
you
like-
then remove it off the consent and have a discussion about it, and then you can approve it.
Okay.
So yeah, any discussion on any item will remove from the consent calendar and put it on as the first item on your scheduled items.
So,
Okay, so I would like
the way that works, so she just tells us now and we just.
Yeah, you'll do it on the
We'll do
record
it
up there. Yeah.
But I don't know what your comment is, we'll hear soon enough, but if I have comments on minutes and I think they have something wrong when I write them, I just send it to Jody and she normally fixes it. So I don't know what kind of issue it is, but in the future you can do that too.
Okay. It's more of a procedural thing.
Okay.
Suggestion. Do I do that now or do I wait till the next?
Well, if you have an objection to the approval of the minutes that you'd like to discuss, there, that's fine, unless, if it's a procedural thing that staff can deal with.
So
then we can
I'll just say
resolve
what it is, so
Yeah.
I read the minutes, and I would like to have seen some of the comments made by the citizens in more detail. And I'm wondering if there's
Okay.
some way we could maybe do some voice software that would make that, I don't wanna make that more onerous for Jody to do that. Is there a way, and I just talked to Ernesto about his chicken, but, about, you know, somehow adding a little more detail to the minutes, because I noticed like John, is that you?
Yeah.
Like John, because you're taking in minutes.
Yes.
Oh, because like John Barrett's comments, it was really kind of just, it didn't identify everything that he talked about with some concerns that he had. And I feel like, you know, if they're taking the time to come to our meetings and outline some concerns, which I really appreciated, because when I met with the district, Debbie brought those up to them, which I thought, well done, you know? So, but the normal person just trying to engage with the city council, what's happening, wouldn't have gotten that from the district.
Yeah, so, I mean, I can absolutely put more detail into the personal appearances section. I usually don't put a ton of detail because none of it's like deciding anything, you know, and that's kind of the stuff that really matters and what, you know, legal cases don't go back to personal appearances really. And so I can definitely put more personal appearances details if you want. Yeah, any kind of questions or kind of suggestions in that vein, definitely when it needs to be moved off the consent items, just come shoot me an email and I
Hey,
can.
you look at that again and maybe, because I remember some other comments about word.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it reminds me for the public to access personal appearance comments on the YouTube recording. Doesn't indicate the individual and the time that they started speaking, and they can click on it.
As far as I know, they don't.
We just do public appearances.
It's just this section.
Because that would be cool.
Well, we can do that.
Too, have a timestamp for the video, and maybe the video links.
That just gets hard.
It's easy for people to find it all.
We could do that if our program did everything all at once, but you're talking about 2 and 3 different programs.
No, we could throw the link in the minutes pretty quick.
That's why I had a about that. So what's going to be more helpful to you, because I don't want to create something that's more difficult.
Yeah, no, adding more detail in, I mean, I can easily do that.
Because I have the link to the video tomorrow morning. If I say here's the link, that could go on the top of the minutes.
Yeah, how well does the link transfer? Because, you know, we put out the link, or we put out the minutes as a PDF, not really something people can like click or interact with too much.
PDFs are pretty good for links.
You should be able to click.
Let's try getting the link
And
on
that's
the
all I want to
minutes.
say, I'm
Yeah.
okay with approving tonight's minutes, but I just don't know when to bring that up or have it. This is good.
Way back in the day, it had verbatim what anybody said.
And that was before we used to stream and record.
Yeah.
And just so you know, the history was once we found more citizens wanted to actually hear it versus read minutes. So once we started providing recording and streaming, we reduced how much we typed because we found more citizens going to the actual recording then. But that's the history.
It's just faster to just read, I can just.
Yeah, okay.
Who knows, everybody has a preference.
But state law does, I mean, the expectation of minutes is not a essentially blow by blow verbatim. And the legislature has essentially provided latitude if there is video recordings or voice recordings of minutes, of meetings.
Okay, so are we clear on that? Okay, so we're not gonna move that off, we're just gonna do a consent item?
Yeah.
Okay. And then beyond that, we've got this public hearing resolution about this community block grant, and we're gonna do a presentation on that, and then we'll vote to approve or not approve it.
Yeah, this is a required, we got a bunch of CDBG money for, during the COVID stimulus package. And we've been using it down over time. We got more money than we could honestly go through initially. So tonight, there's just the money to United Way. And then 25,000 for the Meals on Wheels program. So Ken will make that presentation, there'll be a public hearing, and then.
Okay, so they'll make a presentation, and we'll just vote.
Yeah, you'll have to hold the public hearing.
Yes.
Yes.
If we
you'll have to
don't
open it and
vote,
close it.
if we don't vote to approve it, then it would go to something else, or it's just gone.
We still have, even after this, we still have like $70,000, which we're trying to figure out how to spend. So.
By the fiscal year?
Ken will have the date, I want to say it's like September or August. Okay. But she can tell you that, but yeah, it just doesn't go to anybody, just sits.
Okay. All right, then we got an appointment to the Beautification Committee, an appointment to the Neighborhood Commission. And we'll just go on those. And we've got a communication item that was in your packets that we don't need to go over. And Jamie, has anything? So I think we're pretty.
Okay, I'm gonna be a new record for you, Mayor.
No kidding. So on the Freedom Tree up front,
Yes.
I didn't see any markers, and maybe, unless I don't know where it's at.
I'll follow
And
up.
then there's the Freedom Tree supposedly at the cemetery, which maybe we should call it the veteran tree and not confuse the two. So we can look at that. And I know we're looking at the trees are in their longevity is.
I'll follow up again with our public works staff.
Yeah, just see, because I mean, if there's a sign, if we're gonna do construction, probably not wise to put a sign that's full by count, but. And then I guess we'll have a report on the trees or.
You got it. Yeah.
That's their age or.
Okay, we'll move into the other room, thank you.
Yeah. I think I was 21 minutes.
I don't think we'll need that, we got enough personal affairs.
Yes, that's.
Okay. That's okay. That's okay. I'll.
It's like working on your car. Yeah, it looks like a little extra. Feels the same. Is she first? Yeah,
So What time is that?
Still leaves a few things for us to go around, but I don't think it's mistakes or something. Yeah.
Ready?
But what is 99% accurate, the others 8%?
I'd like to call this meeting to order and welcome you all to City Council. Tonight, we'd like to start out with an invocation by Stephanie Bisnaugh. If you'd like to come up.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful for the many blessings which we have been given here, especially in this country, the blessing of freedom, and for those who have served and fought to provide that blessing for us. We're grateful for the peace and the security that we feel here in our community, in our neighborhoods, and here locally, and ask you to continue to grant us these blessings as well. We'd ask you to watch over those who are in areas of this world and this country who are not provided the same blessings of peace and security, that they would have a measure of thy blessing with them, that they would feel individual peace and be able to have some ease in their suffering, and that those of us who are in a position to help may find ways to serve and to better the community around us and those outside of our awareness as well. We'd ask you to watch over us today in this meeting, that the information and the opinions and ideas that are shared would be done with respect and with the information that is to benefit the city, and that we as residents would be able to recognize the benefits which we have been blessed with and be able to use these blessings to better those around us. Again, we are grateful, and we ask you to watch over us this day in this meeting. In the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ, amen.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next, we'd like to have a pledge of allegiance from Catherine Christensen. All rise.
Please repeat it with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Now we're going to allow for personal appearances. Time has been set aside for the public to express their ideas, concerns, and comments on items not scheduled in the public as public hearings on the agenda
Those wishing to speak are encouraged to show respect for those who serve the city. Comments should focus on issues concerning the city. Those wishing to speak should have signed in before the beginning of this meeting. And I've got a list here of those people who have, and I'll call you up one at a time. And we just ask that you keep your comments succinct and to 3 minutes or less. We'll start out with Vanessa Rucker. And if you just would give your address when you come up.
If I don't want to hold this, but will you hold it or I can give it? Is that okay? And I'm gonna spit out my gum. I'm an amateur at this. I've never done this. My name is Vanessa Rucker. I've lived in Orem for 16 years and I've lived off of Palisade Drive for 6 years. I am from a tiny town in Idaho called Weiser. So this is my first big city council meeting. Growing up in a rural town in Idaho instilled me with care and a desire to be a contributor to my community. I'm not normally a person to find faults. I never complain about anything, and I refuse to return items that I do not use to the store. My husband finds this annoying, but it's just not my nature. When I initially saw the construction take place on Palisade, I was eager to see the finishing of speed tables and accessible sidewalks. For months, the Choker Islands, as originally named to me by Taggart Bowen and Sam Kelly, remained covered in orange construction barrels. After watching my own children lose adequate space for their bike lanes down Palisade and seeing a family have to merge in front of my car to avoid the Choker Islands, I decided I need to call the city. Taggart and Sam essentially admitted they only had positive feedback. The islands had barrels around them for months, so the concrete could cure, and a plethora of other excuses. As I dug a little more, I asked more questions. I was met with unanswered voicemails and emails, and I'm happy to forward any of those to any city council members who wish to read them. I wasn't in a little rural town anymore, and I didn't have the connections. So I waited and I kind of gave up until I found a little flyer on my door from a fellow neighbor named Bruce, who's in the back, and realized that we had a lot of neighbors that felt similarly about the Choker Islands. I asked that the council votes to remove the Choker Islands with an understanding that they are unsightly, a hazard for drivers, and that the previous speed bumps were much more effective at slowing drivers than the speed tables that they were replaced with. The Choker Islands are a liability for the city. The way they protrude into the street, especially after turning right onto Palisade, is unexpected. Has anyone seen the Choker Islands in the snow? Even with the sloppy red painted curbs, it proved difficult for the snow plows to remove snow around them this winter, and thus even more difficult for drivers to see them underneath a pile of snow. Also, I asked the city council to drive the route to my home. I do not live on Palisade, but despite the city's survey, it is the only way to access my home. I have to drive Palisade to get to my house. Turn left off Center Street, north, and then look at the very first speed table. Is it a crosswalk? I'll answer it for you. The answer is no. Unlike the survey led us to believe. The renaming of the speed tables to crosswalks was laughable. The renaming of Choker Islands to bulb outs was worrisome. I'm definitely done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we've got Cissy Rasmussen. And if you'd please give your address.
Hi, my name is Cissy Rasmussen. My address is 930 East, 400 South. I've lived here for about 20 years, and I have had kids in our public schools for the last 16 years and will have for the next 10 years. So you can imagine I am very concerned about schools. So I'm here to comment again about the City Council's decision to pay for a feasibility study to decide if Orem needs to create its own district. And first, I want to express my appreciation that some of you have been meeting with our elected school board members to learn about schools and school funding. I also appreciate that some of you have met with PTAs and school community councils to talk about this issue. So thank you so much. I encourage you to invite questions from the teachers and parents in those groups. And I ask you to expand the information section on the city website to add your questions that will guide your assessment of the feasibility study. I also ask you to include on the website a detail that I just learned. I thought that if the council votes for this issue to go to a ballot, it would be on the November 2023 ballot. In fact, it would go on this year's ballot. That information should be clear on the city website. Next, I believe that all of us in Orem need to learn as much as we can about how schools and school funding works before the feasibility study is completed and presented. It's a huge topic with lots of details and acronyms and unfamiliar processes. We'll all be better served and make better decisions if we know some of the basics. I encourage residents to reach out to principals, elected school board members, and district administration to start learning the answers to their questions. Here are some of the questions I recommend that we all ask. What are the advantages and disadvantages of a large school district? How does Orem support the north and western parts of the district? And how do the north and west support Orem schools? What are the benefits of staying in the district until it splits in the future into equal, equitable areas with balanced funding and balanced student numbers? Finally, I just want to address one fact. Funding for schools comes from several places. Property taxes contribute approximately 25% of the funding to our schools. The rest is based on the number of students. In Orem, we have a decent amount of property tax income, but we don't have the student numbers necessary to qualify for the funding needed to run schools. So the final question I want you to ask when you look at the feasibility study is this: how much does it currently cost to run Orem schools? And how much revenue does Orem produce or qualify for? To me, that is the most important question when it comes to the financial concerns. And the answer to that question will tell you how much you will have to raise taxes to create an Orem school district. Thank you so much for reaching out and learning, and I encourage you to keep doing that and all of us to keep learning. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we've got Jana Hyatt. Please give your address.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Jana Hyatt, and I live at 642 West, 850 South. I'm also here to talk about the Orem City, the possibility of making its own school district. And I do want to thank the City Council. We've had some great conversations recently with many of you, and I am so grateful that the city is taking a moment to survey the population and understand what feelings are out there. So I'll just introduce myself. I am the Mountain View Council PTA president. So in my capacity, I work with all the elementary schools that feed into Mountain View and Lake Ridge. And this has been, as you can imagine, a big issue for us. It's not a new issue. It's something that Mayor Brunt's looked at and other people have looked at. And it's actually something that our school board members have been following and tracking. So it is an important issue. Things have changed a lot in the last 10 and 20 years with school funding, and Orem itself has changed a lot in the last 20 years. So it's understandable that with a calculation this complicated that people wouldn't understand exactly all the details that feed into it. But so we're grateful that the City Council is getting educated and understanding, and most of all, having conversations with people about this. And while the calculation can be complex, and it's important that we have the feasibility study, it's also important that we understand the feasibility study before we make a decision. And so our ask, and the ask of the people that I've been talking with in PTA, is that we not make a decision until we've had a discussion. So we want to make sure that everyone understands the data in the feasibility study. I had a great conversation. It looks like I have a second. I have a great conversation with a lady in my neighborhood recently who is an older resident. She doesn't have kids in schools anymore. And she has a lot of concerns about how Orem is changing. And it was really important for her to realize that schools are funded by taxes and students. And so if your student numbers drop, then your taxes have to go up. And Orem is in a situation where our student numbers are dropping because our population is getting older, or the people that are moving in are younger, they're students, they're not families. And my neighborhood's a great example of this. When we moved into our neighborhood, we had just the families that had already raised their children, but they're selling now and new people are moving in. But instead of replacing those households with children of 6 or 7 children, they're getting replaced with households of 1 or 2 or 3. And so the math will probably not change We'll never get back to those numbers we had before because there just are not households of 8. I have a household of 8 and we're an anomaly in Orem. And so I think those are some things we need to think about. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we've got Abby Vivros.
Hi, my name is Abby Farrows, and I'm here to address the Choker Islands on Palisades Drive, and thank you for listening to us. I live off Palisades. I have to access this road to enter and exit out of my immediate street. I use it at least 20 to 30 times a day. I also run along it. When construction began on Palisades, I had no idea that the Choker Islands, or what you're calling bulb outs, would be installed. In fact, many of my neighbors, we were all trying to guess what they were. We thought they were flower planters. We thought they were dangerous and unnecessary, but once we realized that they were actually Choker Islands, we were upset because they were progressively getting bulkier, and we thought they posed a danger. We started a group chat about how to get them removed, contacted Sam Kelly, like Vanessa said, and Taggart Bowen. We were pretty much ignored. Not sure if it's because we are women, but we certainly did not get a response. Then we found out that another group of neighbors just north of us were also trying to contact the city. We decided to collaborate with them since they had some men in their group. I created a spreadsheet for Orem City that shows the responses to 70 Palisades neighbors and their feedback on the Choker Islands. Of the 70 residents, 66, so there's 70, there's 66, said they did not like these cement blocks. Out of the 100 plus emails from the neighborhoods that were surveyed, a vast majority said they wanted the Choker Islands out. Our committee forwarded this information to Orem City Engineering, the mayor, and the city council members, but our efforts were discounted because they created a new survey and was just delivered to our doors a couple weeks ago. I worked at BYU for over a decade, creating surveys and questionnaires that are used by the military, the government, and university internationally. The questionnaire created by the city is a great example of survey bias, which is something that researchers tried very hard to avoid. Most of the 13 questions focus on our feelings towards pedestrian safety in general. Those questions then fed into the final 2 questions about the Choker Islands. This is misleading and skews the data by using emotional feelings about our safety, which we all believe is important. The survey should have been titled Pedestrian Safety in Orem City instead of what they actually called it. Please let us know how you feel about the raised crosswalks on Palisades Drive. In the city, if the city really wanted feedback about the Choker Islands, they should have omitted the first 11 questions. Sam said the data from the survey could be ready by today. I'm really curious to know what those results look like. I don't know if he has them. As a runner, I can tell you that these Choker Islands forced my group to veer to the center, and that poses a risk, a danger to myself and drivers. And as a parent of children who love to ride bikes around the neighborhoods, it also poses a danger because it forces them in. If the city really wanted some unbiased feedback, they should have considered the original questionnaire that we sent out. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we've got, and I might get this wrong, John Benjamin Brooks.
Hello, thank you for your service. I'm John Brooks. I live on 350 North Palisade Drive, and I live probably in the middle of the street. This is my son, Benjamin. We're here to advocate for the Choker Islands to be removed from our street. I think it's already been said before, so we're just adding to that, but I figured I have not coached my son, even though that may be, you think I have. He asked yesterday, what are you going to do? I want to come and I want to voice my opinion. I pretty much picked him up and we drove right down here, so I don't even know exactly what he's going to say. So go ahead.
In my opinion, I think that it was a great idea. I'm glad that someone used their brain to create it, but it's not really my favorite. And sometimes it's like right when you're turning it onto a different street, and that's where the Choker Islands, that's where some of them are. I saw a couple of them on the way here and I was like, oh man. But sometimes when I'm riding my bike, I have to like go in and out when I watch the cars go closer to me. And then what if a teenager or a person just got their driving license and was having a hard time at staying in between the chokers? And yeah, that's all that I got. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we've got Andrea Driggs and Todd Driggs. And please say your address.
Hi, I'm Andrea Driggs. I live on Palisade, and I'm again here, not again, this is the first time I've ever been to the city council. But again, as a runner, I'm wanting to address the Choker Islands because early morning running kind of catches you by surprise, especially with snow. I just feel they're a liability and could be just cause injury because you're not aware of them. For people that aren't used to running on our street, I mean, that also causes a liability. With having young kids learning to drive, just as Benjamin was saying, yeah, what a surprise to hit that when you turn around a corner and they're trying to like navigate just the street. So not only it just kind of ruined the look of the street, the beauty of our street. I don't mind the box speed bumps or to slow traffic down, but I felt like it was overkill to do so many of them on Palisade because it's not like around the mall or schools or things like that where there's a huge population of pedestrians. I felt like it was kind of overkill there. So I'm just in support of removing the Choker Islands from Palisades. Thank you.
Thank you. Last, we've got Dave Johnston.
Dave Johnston, and I live in Northeast Orem. I've been a resident of Orem City for 39 years. So I've experienced a lot of great community and great life here. I wanted to discuss the Palisade Drive situation. If you live in Orem City for any length of time, you realize that you have to travel north and south to get anywhere you really want to go. There are 8 major streets that carry traffic in these directions: 800 West, 400 West, Orem Boulevard, State Street, 400 East, 800 East, 10th East, and Palisade Drive. Before I came to the meeting tonight, I drove every single one of those streets from 800 North as far as it would go to the south. On my drive, I encountered 7 school districts, 1 hospital, no speed bumps, and only 1 bulb out, with the exception of Palisade. If you drive on Palisade Drive from Center Street to 400 North, there isn't a single speed bump or a bulb out. It dead ends down there, so you can go to 600 South, but that's where it ends. From Center Street to 800 North, there are 9 speed bumps. 7 of those 9 are between Center Street and 400 North. Every one except 1 also has a bulb out. So I drove a total of 132 blocks today from north to south in our city and found out that only 1 stretch of road has this plethora of speed bumps. In fact, a 4-block radius contains 80% of the speed bumps on those 132 blocks that I drove today. And there isn't a school zone on Palisade Drive. The only conclusion a person can come to is that this 4-block stretch must be the most dangerous stretch in the entire state of Utah. In fact, I'd think you'd be hard pressed to find any other 4-block radius anywhere in the state that has 7 speed bumps and 6 bulb outs. The truth of the matter is that Palisade is just like every other street that allows citizens to travel north and south in Orem. It's no better and no worse than any of the other streets I drove on today. Let's start treating it that way. Thanks for your time, for your service, and for listening to our point of view.
Thank you. We appreciate all your comments. And we'd like to move on to the consent items. We have 2 consent items. 7.1, an approval of the meeting minutes. And second, a resolution that we've reviewed that goes through voter participation areas.
I move for approval. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, does anyone want to take anything off the consent items? No?
Then with that, I have an approval. I propose approval to those, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Let's have a vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The consent items pass. Next, we'll move on to the scheduled items. Our first scheduled item is a public hearing / resolution. The city will receive public comments on community development block grant, projected use of funds for the CARES Act, CDBG-CV funding, and consider approval of a substantial amendment to the 2019-2020 annual action plan. In this presentation, if we can invite Ken Ransom, CDBG Commission Chairperson, and Keena Joe Matthews, Community Services Manager. If you guys would like to present to us.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. Nice to meet you. I've presented to your predecessor and just want to say hi to you officially, and Council Member Millett. Want to thank you both for your service and joining the council. I feel like I'm a junior member of the council, so since I've been presenting so many times, but we'll get started here. We have 3 more recommendations for you for our CDBG COVID funding.
Can you guys see it up there?
All right, so just a quick summary of previous allocations that the council has approved. The initial grant of COVID CDBG funding. You can see the amount there and the specific amounts for the different entities and agencies that receive funding. And then Orem received a second allocation of COVID CDBG funding, and you can see.
And this is over what time frame?
So we received, okay, we received the first allocation in the summer of 2020. And then we received the next allocation about the same time, the next in 2021.
Okay, thank you.
And so you can see the summary there, and at the bottom of the slide, you can see the amount that's left to allocate of this COVID funding, $106,181.68. And these are the these requirements for this COVID funding are listed here. They're required to be related to the coronavirus pandemic and or to mitigate impacts of COVID-19. So we're limited to that specific purpose with this funding. And so previously the council has given our commission these priorities. And so our focus is always on projects that serve the citizens of Orem. So the first of our 3 recommendations for you is we recommend that the United Way's request for water filling stations in their 3 owned buildings to help and prevent COVID and mitigate its impacts of $7,000. We recommend that the council consider and approve this recommendation. And Community Action Services and Food Bank, their Financial Learning Center, we recommend that this proposal be funded as well for $3,253. And then Mountain Land Association of Governments Meal on Wheels. We recommend that this be funded at $25,000. And I do want to note really quickly that all three of these, Orem is partnering with Provo and Utah County to help fund these projects.
Funds with those other organizations, is that what you say when we're participating?
Yeah, so for the first one with United Way, we have regional applications because they're all coming to each of us. And so we have them apply to us regionally. And then we determined who will get, assigned that project. So we were assigned the United Way project from the three. And then the other two were actually funding together. So that's our portion, the 3253 or whatever. Yeah, that's why it's an automatic. That's our portion of the percentage of them served of Orem residents. And then for Meals on Wheels, it's a $75,000 ask. We just took a third of it.
So do you have numbers on how many residents this 25,000 serves?
Jeremy is here and he's going to speak. So we'll have him speak to that.
So just summary of our recommendation on these three requests from these three agencies. And we recommend that the council fund these recommendations. And so if these are approved, this will be the remaining balance of this COVID funding that we showed at the beginning of the presentation. We will have future recommendations for you as additional requests come in from these different agencies. So the next step is to support a funding recommendation and adopt a resolution. Any questions?
I have one.
Debbie?
So these filling stations that are, touchless, is that something that we could put in our parks or fitness center places that have high volumes of people, but would make it look like they're about $1,000 a piece, if I did the math right? Is that something we could look at expanding, or does it have to be like a 501c3 like United Way? Can we use it to do that?
We can, it just depends on where it's located. So with the fitness center, probably not. Some of the parks in our target neighborhoods could have those filling stations.
Low income
parks, yes.
I'm certainly interested in that because I think going forward, that would be a good idea.
Yeah, I'll bring that up with parks and
Thank you.
Public Works.
You have any other comments, questions? We'd like to open it up for public comment.
Good evening. My name is Karen McCandless, and I live in Orem. I'm the CEO of Community Action Services and Food Bank, and we're located in Provo. I just want to express my appreciation to the city of Orem and the council for support it's been giving our clients and members of our communities who are in poverty. You'll see as the presentation was going on that we have requested and received a variety of funding for different projects that we have going on in the community as we have been responding to COVID. I would like to just tell you for just a moment about what this request will do. I appreciate Councilmember McDonald's question because I'm not as precise. I did not apply for $3,253. I applied for $25,000, and based on our data, that was distributed proportionately amongst the three funders. And so this money will be used to provide financial counseling and budget classes. We target those of low income. And with the utility agreement we have with the city of Orem, those receiving those services need to go to a financial learning class. So this will help support that. So I appreciate your support on that. And one thing I just wanted to just give you a quick update. In a prior council meeting, you approved some funding for some equipment for a food pantry at the Orem Senior Center. So we have those agreements one's in place. We have one coming back to the city tomorrow. And we're hoping to get that open within a month. It all depends when the refrigerator arrives. So we can't do it without the commercial refrigerator, but as soon as we get that, then we can really move forward. Everything else will move very, very quickly. So again, I appreciate your support. And thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else who would like to make a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. My name is Jeremy Pearson. I'm the Nutrition Program Manager for Mountain Land Association of Governments. We go by MAG now. It's easier to just say MAG. It's a lot shorter. We're just on 800 North, 600 East is our offices. We serve 3 counties, Utah County, Wasatch, and Summit County. So we're the Aging Department and Family Services for those 3 counties. In answer to your question, Councilwoman, the $25,000, it serves 173 Orem residents. So of that, there's 173 Orem residents. And that will pay for a month of meals or 8,000 meals. Since COVID began, we've increased 30%. So we added 200 extra clients in under 2 years, which is incredible. So we went from 475 home delivered meals to 675, 200 extra meals just within the COVID period. The good news is that all of this money is 100% to service delivery. So all this money goes to food and packaging, no staff, no labor, gas, vehicles, none of that. It's all to food. Our food is made at the Utah County Security Center in Spanish Fork, the Utah County Jail. And so this food will pay that monthly invoice. This money will pay that monthly invoice. I'm happy to answer any other questions if you have any.
Debbie?
So I eat with my father at the senior center, and but they're always saying that a lot of people don't pay, or that and it's only $3 suggested.
Right.
So my question is it perceived as a benefit for low income, or is the $3 you really should pay it? And if you really can't, I mean, I'm trying to understand why there's always a deficit. $3 is still a deal.
Right. So the Older Americans Act is the federal law that governs this program. And under the Older Americans Act, you can only ask for a suggested donation. So it's a voluntary donation. And so $3 is a suggested amount. And so seniors, regardless of their income, can donate or not donate. And it's not an income-based program. There's only 2 requirements. To receive Meals on Wheels, you have to be 60 years or older and homebound. That's it. There's no income requirements at all. To eat at a senior center.
It probably runs a deficit every year. Is that correct?
No, it doesn't run a
deficit.
Doesn't. So before COVID, we did not run deficits. COVID is what has caused us to run deficits.
That's
because we added, like I said, 30%
more
more people than our budget normally can pay for. We've already exceeded all of the ARPA funds and the stimulus money that we've been given. So we're just asking for extra money to get us through this fiscal year.
So this extra 75, will this put you out of deficit and give you a little buffer, or tell me about that?
It will not. It will just help us maintain. It will not get us out of deficit.
Okay. And who covers that? Is it just other taxpayers from other funds at MAG?
What will cover the deficit for this year is next year's ARPA funds allocation. That was broke into 3 years. And so, Garrett, do you want to help with that?
Sorry, I'm just curious.
Yeah, so we do have money to cover the shortage for this year. I'll let him speak to that.
But what happens when ARPA funds eventually run out?
So great question. Listen, my name is Garrett Henderson. I'm budget and contract manager for MAG. When our real hope is, as we get out of this COVID, our numbers do decrease. We are seeing that decrease happen, even though they've increased 30% overall. When ARPA funds do run out, we have plans to fundraise for that deficit to cover whatever our current budget will not handle, so we can manage those numbers better. The problem is with COVID, Jeremy's maybe a little underselling, but during COVID, our numbers increased about 100% as far as what we were serving. And now that COVID's kind of subsided a little bit, we're still about 30% higher than we ever have been as far as prison invoices or security center invoices.
So when you say fundraise, do you mean come back to get a CDBG grant?
No, we have plans to actually reach out to other donors and other national programs to seek funding to help
so or help perpetuate the current service level that we're at. And if we do not reach that, then we will have to dial back our numbers to make sure that we are fiscally sound.
Okay,
So,
thank you so much.
yeah.
Debbie, just a point of clarification, seniors are considered what we call presumed eligible under CDBG guidelines or HUD guidelines, which means they're presumed low income regardless of their income.
Any other questions or anyone else from the audience who'd like to come up?
Feel like I've been here before. Bill Holters from United Way. Good to see you all. Just main objective of saying thank you. But if you're not aware, these drinking stations will serve a lot of our volunteers and staff that provide senior transportation for your seniors. We have a volunteer program focused in the Orem area, taking seniors to medical appointments. That's in addition to all the traditional programs that you already know of, as far as the Welcome Baby, the first time home visitor programs, et cetera. So the network of volunteers and people that are supporting your citizens is what this is all about. I just want to tell you thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else who'd like to make a comment? Okay, well, we appreciate you coming and giving us this presentation.
Close the public hearing.
We'll close the public hearing and then we'll have a vote.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that the city council by resolution, the city will receive public comments on the community development block agreement, grant, CDBG, projected use of funds for CARES Act, CDBG-CV funding, and consider approval of a substantial amendment to the 2019-2020 annual action plan.
Second.
Thank you. A vote.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. Thank you. Now we've got a couple of appointments here. Scheduled item 8.2, we've got an appointment to the Beautification Committee of Joshua Doughty. Joshua Doughty. Is that how you pronounce his last name?
Yes.
Okay. So, yes.
Oh.
I move that we approve the appointment of Joshua Doughty as a member of the Beautification Committee.
Second.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
The appointment passes. Is Joshua here? Okay. All right, we've got another appointment. This is to the Neighborhood Commission. This is Cynthia Noble. And I'd like to appoint her to the Neighborhood Commission. Would someone like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to appoint Cynthia Noble to the Orem Neighborhood Commission.
I'll second that.
Jeff, do you want?
Aye.
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 I just want to say, so Jeff and I have had associations with Cynthia. She's very involved in the neighborhood. She's a very just wonderful person, and we look forward to working with her on this commission. So
Sounds good. Thank you. Now we'd like to move on to our last item, which we're going to set a record with this meeting. If City Manager has anything you'd like to say?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of brief things, Mayor and Council. I had a meeting earlier this week with Rocky Mountain Power. Rocky Mountain Power is engaged in an effort to begin a process of meter replacement in the community, specifically moving to automatic meter infrastructure. And they are going to initiate that here in the next couple of weeks with approximately 15% of our community. I just wanted to make you aware that that is a project that is now getting underway. They are going to specifically target residential uses that have solar. I guess there is an added benefit of moving to automated meter infrastructure for customers who are essentially taking and pushing power back onto the grid. And so if you do start getting phone calls about Rocky Mountain contractors being in neighborhoods, swapping out meters, that is part of the effort. Each of the residents who will have their meter replaced will be contacted directly by Rocky Mountain Power.
Jamie, I
provided
got a letter to
information.
that effect in the last week.
Excuse me?
I got a letter to
Oh.
that effect as a homeowner in
Yes.
the last week or so. I don't know if others have.
Yes. So they will be reaching out specifically to each customer whose meter will be replaced and providing them an opportunity to receive some information about the why behind the meter switch out and to answer any questions. And then when Rocky Mountain does come on site to make that meter swap out, they actually will also knock on the door. So obviously, we're going to advise our public safety department or our police department and advise them of the fact that they're working in the community. But I just wanted to make sure that you knew as well in the event you get some questions about Rocky Mountain and the work that they're doing in a number of our neighborhoods. This morning, we actually, as a project team, reviewed bid submittals for general contractor submissions for our Hillcrest Park project. We actually received 5 bids from qualified general contractors. We've narrowed in on one contractor who met all the criteria, and we're just following up based on their references and want to make sure that they in fact are the individual firm that we should be working with. Just of interest to you, for example, this contractor that we are narrowing in on is the same contractor who built Thunder Junction down in St. George, the large all abilities park there. They also were involved in the construction of the Sand Hollow Aquatic Center, also in St. George, and a number of other projects here locally tied to school districts, not necessarily school districts here in the Alpine School District, but up in Salt Lake Valley. So they come obviously with good credentials, and we just want to make sure that they are everything they make themselves out to be on paper. So we're going to follow up there. In addition to that, just want to make you aware that we are, this is the 1-year anniversary of our recreation, the Orem Family Fitness Center. We are celebrating 1 year. And over the course of the week, we've had a series of, I guess you could say, activities and announcements that we've been making. Stay tuned for the big announcement that we're making, I think, Bryce, on Thursday. Is that right? We're making a big announcement on Thursday. Those who have an interest and enjoy the facilities, the wet side of our facilities, are going to be very excited about what we're talking about, what we're going to do there. Just a special note, Debbie. I think you're
be on Thursday at a certain time.
We're just going to announce it online, and I think Debbie, your grandkids are going to love you for it.
Will you have pictures of what you're going to put in?
Yes, there will be pictures.
Will there be lifeguards? No.
We have been talking for several years about a Volkswagen grant. You remember that the city received dollars for a settlement that Volkswagen Corporation had for some of their diesel emission issues that funded a number of our public works vehicles. It funded half of our new tiller truck, fire truck that we will take delivery on later this year. And it also funded a senior center bus. But the senior bus has been something that we have ordered. And because of supply chain issues, we've been advised on several occasions that the model that we ordered is not available. But I'm happy to inform you that we have finally found a magic bus. So we are in the process now of completing the purchase order, and we will be very excited to add that to our fleet and to obviously facilitate and assist the activities that are held at the senior center. And then just by way of information, this Palisade Drive discussion, I know this is not a unanimous conversation, as I know you are well aware. We did hire Jakes and Associates, which is a public relations outreach firm. They did complete a survey. They're in the process of finalizing that survey, and we were hoping to have results by today. We do not have the results yet. We will make sure that we get them to you in an expeditious way as possible, and provide to you kind of the input from all the residents in and around Palisade Drive. Just as a reminder, this was not, and this project has historically not been a city initiated project. This project was initiated by the neighborhood, and they made specific requests and even paid for the original speed bumps that are along Palisade Drive. We did modify, obviously, the, I guess you could say, the design of the speed bumps for a number of, or not speed bumps because we call them speed tables. First and foremost, for public safety purposes, speed bumps are actually not appreciated by emergency response vehicles. And so we actually do incur wear and tear on our vehicles to a greater degree going over a speed bump than a speed table. And so we moved forward with industry standard now, which is not a bump, but a table.
May I ask a question, Jamie?
Sure.
Aren't there speed bumps at the parking lot we share with Mountain View High School? No, is it Mountain View? Mountain View High School and the fitness center, they seem to be
Yes.
speed bumps because they wake you up if you go over very fast.
Yes. And those are, obviously, that's not our law.
Right, it's a shared lot. I
That's a
get that.
shared
So
law.
I just
So
was
the Alpine
clarifying
School
that's what
District-
is in there. Thank you.
Yeah. The idea of the bulb outs is per federal traffic, essentially recommendations. But obviously, we're going to take whatever information is returned to us from the community outreach firm, and we're going to provide it to you, and we're going to act according to your direction. But it has taken us a while to move forward and to complete the survey. I hope you will recognize and allow a little leniency as to why it's taking so long, because we were pretty busy. Development Services Department was pretty busy in February, making changes to another of your priorities. And so that is one of the projects that kind of fell to number 2 in the priority list versus number 1. But we are obviously anxious to get the information to you and to put the issue to rest and to make improvements if necessary to the speed tables going forward. So I just wanted to let you know that obviously the city is keenly aware of the requests and the concerns. I don't think staff is ignoring the calls and emails. In fact, I have received personally several emails. I've been copied on emails. I know staff is responding to them. I know there's a lot of, I guess you could say, energy on both sides of this issue. And we're just as anxious to get this wrapped up as you are. So, and that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Lene, did you have a comment?
Yeah, and I don't see the people here anymore, unfortunately, but I just did want to make a comment on the Palisade Drive because I've been responding to emails to citizens, and we've been anxious to get this on our agenda so we can move forward on it. But we have been waiting for this survey, and I'm going to actually say I took the survey and I share the concerns that were voiced. I really wish that we had the opportunity to review the survey questions as a council. We do not. That was put out by the company, but I think in the future that would be a wise thing, is just so there can be some understanding. Sometimes nothing against this company who did it, but sometimes they just don't quite understand the situation. And so the questions maybe don't match some of the information that we'd like to receive as a council. And after taking that survey myself, I also saw it as something that maybe didn't quite fit the information that we were trying to gather. Yeah, not once did I consider them raised crosswalks. So that was kind of an interesting question when I saw that one in there too. But so I just want to make that comment for those who maybe aren't quite here yet, but I guess there's some of you here, but we are anxious to move forward on this.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Motion to adjourn. Will you accept a motion to adjourn, Mr. Mayor?
I will.
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.